flash.
needs,
So can I
These two-
just let people in?
Yeah.
hello, hello.
Let me get to the participants so I can see people.
What a day. Wow. It's over. That guy pulled the plug, huh? Mr. Mr. Jazz Fest.
You know, they have a lot of partners, they just weren't ready with all the material yet, so they are coming on April 20th.
Okay, that's okay with you?
Plenty
Libby,
of time, it's not till August.
Yeah.
So.
Libby says, okay, and I'm good with it.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate
You
you.
are all set to go.
Okay, great. Are we unmuted?
Yes.
Great. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of Community Board 5's Parks and Public Spaces Committee. The April 3rd meeting of the Parks and Public Spaces Committee. I am Libby Hutton. I am the chair. And let's begin by going around the room and introducing ourselves. And in that time, hopefully the vice chair will arrive and we can confirm that we have quorum. Catherine?
I'm Catherine Ellington.
John Harris.
Ronald Vikram. Michael K-Back.
And our members online.
Charles Knight.
Come on, Todd, shout it out. Todd went to the bathroom.
You have Ben Schlegel with ENT Marketing.
Oh, this is for members of the committee,
I've been,
but hi, thanks for coming. Okay, we're just gonna wait just another minute to get quorum because we are expecting quorum tonight. And we will get started momentarily. Thank you for your patience.
When do the attendance rules go into effect?
They're in effect,
They are,
yes.
What is what in effect?
the attendance rules.
Attendance rules?
Yes, that you have to be here.
Uh-oh, I better get here quick.
We don't have BJ either.
BJ's supposed to be virtual.
I know,
Okay.
but I
They
just wanna make
second
sure that her,
attendees.
she's not in it. I wanna make sure that her link works. She got the presenter one, but she's not here. Hey Todd, can you introduce yourself, please?
Everybody hear me?
Nope.
Yeah.
I'm here, Todd Shapiro, Vice Chair, Community Board 5 and longtime member of PPS.
Libby, I'm on Zoom.
Well done, Todd.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have fun. 1, 2, 3, 4. I believe we need 8 for quorum, but. Okay. So on tonight's agenda, we'll begin this meeting anyway, because now we have quorum, now that my vice chair, Michael Southworth is here. Okay, so on tonight's agenda, we are going to be hearing 3 items. And we're gonna be hearing an activation for the Coca-Cola Embassy Suites activation in Herald Square Park to create a flash mob performance on May 8th. We will be hearing about a review, a discussion amongst ourselves of a DOT proposed rule change for exclusive seating in pedestrian plazas. And we will also be discussing the CB5 points of agreement items for Midtown South mixed use rezoning. And we will also be hearing from the Parks Department. Representative Paul Evans is here to hear an update on our parks. So first, without further ado, I would actually like to move it to ask if there's anyone here from the public who would like to speak on any other business before the committee that is not listed on this agenda. Please raise your hand in person or raise your hand virtually if you are not here. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak on an item not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we will close new business and move on to our first agenda item. For each item, I will follow the following process. I'll ask the presenter to introduce themselves and their team. I'll then turn the meeting over to the designated committee member who will present a summary of the topic and any necessary details. After that presentation, if we've got questions for the applicant, we'll give them an opportunity to address those questions. And if any point members of the committee would like to ask questions, they can raise their hand and ask to be recognized by the chair. But please remember to address all of your comments to the chair. And if you wish to speak, I will recognize you. And then we will go to public comment. It'll work a little bit differently for our discussion items that are not applications and presentations. And then we will go into our business session. And just a reminder that during our business session, we will not hear any additional public comment. It will just be members of the committee who are able to speak. I did want to make one announcement now that we have quorum and now we have everyone in our meeting. Just a reminder for everybody on this committee, and really this goes for everyone on the board, that if you are not assigned an agenda item, please do not contact the various applicants or representatives from bids. It makes doing our work very it duplicates our work and it makes it much more confusing and more difficult for the community partners that we work with to effectively get things done. It's very confusing on their end. So please only contact different representatives in your capacity as a board member if you have been assigned that item or if you have run it by the chair of that respective committee. In this case, that would be me. So thank you. Without further ado, our first item on the agenda is the Coca-Cola and activation. And Catherine, would you like to introduce the applicants?
Sure. Sure. So the name of this activation is Coca-Cola Share a Coke, and this is going to take place in Herald Square Park. And we're going to hear from the applicant, but basically this is a very short activation. It's on a Thursday from 11:30 a.m. to about 1 p.m. I'll let him talk. It's, you know, I think the big strength here is that it is family friendly. So it gives some of what we look for in terms of quality of life. And it is an activation in collaboration with Embassy Suites. And I'm gonna let Ben, he's here, so I'm gonna let you present. Go ahead. Glad to have you here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the introduction. My name is Ben Schlegel. I'm a producer with ENT Marketing. If it's okay with you, I'd like to share my screen real quick and I can walk you through our activation quickly.
Yes, that would be great.
Okay. So, like was mentioned, this is a activation with Coca-Cola and Embassy Suites. And if you might remember the Share a Coke campaign, which was very popular about a decade ago, where you could purchase a Coke with your name on the can. It was pretty popular in pop culture. So this is part of bringing that campaign back to life. We'll be looking to activate at Herald Square Park on May 8th. The actual time of the activation starts at noon. That's when the flash mob would begin. We envision being on site at 11 a.m. 11:30 a.m. There's some kind of build up with some signage, and I'll walk you through that. And with the flash mob folks there stationary holding signs. 12 to 12:30 is the performance, and then we leave immediately thereafter. So I'll walk you through a few different pieces of this. Overall, we will have 30 dancers. There'll also be one choreographer who is like the leader of the dancers, and then 2 full-time employees, one being myself, one being an account manager. Will be on site. Like I said, we'll be there arriving at 11 a.m. Start time for the flash mob is noon. Immediately after that is over, we'll be clearing out of the park. We think overall the flash mob time frame will be 20 to 30 minutes long. as part of that, there's a few things we're looking to bring. One is 1 to 2 Bluetooth speakers, and I can share the exact specs of those speakers we're looking to bring. We understand sound is important not to be too loud. We will keep it around 80 decibels. We're not looking to bring a DJ setup or bands or anything like that. This is very similar to like a Bluetooth speaker that you would use at a barbecue or some other type of small event. The song will be a Coke Studio licensed song. We don't know exactly which one it is yet, but it will fit with the Coke brand guidelines, very family friendly. We own the licensing to the music. And I think our brand reflects a lot of what you're all trying to accomplish with it being safe for public consumption and all of those types of things. The Embassy Suites that we're activating with is also, it's about a 4-minute approximate walk from the park. And video and photography will be for internal purposes only. So we're not making videos and pushing them out on socials or anything like that. And I'll talk through a little bit of how do we plan to address that in the park. Again, I won't go through this line for line, but 11 a.m. out of there at latest 1 o'clock, probably closer to 12:30. Everything's really handheld. We're not bringing any product. We're not looking to create any trash or anything like that. So signs will be handheld by the brand folks. We'll have a few signs on stands, letting people know that there'll be photography and videography going on there. And I'll walk you through our plan and where that will all go. This is an example of what the speaker will look like. Again, JBL Party Box. Its max sound doesn't go very far over what the kind of the limits are. So we're very cautious of that. And, we anticipate sound traveling 20, 30 feet at most in a Manhattan type of atmosphere with all of the other sounds going on. This is a map of the area. So as you can see, we have some people logos in here. That's where, starting at 11:30, we'll have folks standing there with signage, and I'll share you what those signs are going to say before the performance. That's where we'll have the photography signage as well, especially right around that red box where we'll be performing. So where those two folks are positioned, there'll also be a sign there letting people know right there next to the activation that we'll be taking photography and videography. Here's an example of the signs, and I have a blown up one of the public notice on the next one. But stay tuned, something's coming up at 12. That's going to be one at 11:30. You'll see a couple folks standing there holding those signs, letting people know that it's coming up. The magic begins soon, same thing. And then on the opposite sides, there'll be surprise at Embassy Suites, 4 minutes away, follow me. And then you can see the public notice about the videography and photography. All this language has been approved by Coca-Cola Legal's team. It's their boilerplate of what they use in public activations. And we can share this with you if you have any specific questions on this. So overall, that's an overall gist of what's going to happen at Ariel Square Park. After that, folks are invited to come to Embassy Suites down the road. They'll be able to craft their own custom Coke can with their own name on it or a friend's name. That's open till 5 o'clock that day. So people can come down right after the performance, or they can stop down later in the day, and we'll be set up there with multiple printers to create custom Coke cans. And that's everything.
Thank you, Ben. Before we take questions, I just want to, the other strength of this application includes the fact that they did outreach to the local precinct so that they notified the precinct. And did you apply for a special permit?
We have applied. We applied, it was either early this week or late last week, but we've applied for the sound permit and the special event permit.
Thank you. So, again, this is a very short activation. Kelly, I see that you're here. Do you want to add anything to what Ben is already? And I want to thank you all for getting us the application in early, and we were able to meet with the applicant ahead of time. But Kelly, do you have comments, that you want to make?
Nope, I think Ben said it all. We're very excited about it. It's gonna be a really nice event. Nice fit for the park. So yeah, I think we're good. We're happy with it.
Kelly, in these kinds of activations, do you actually do outreach to other businesses in the area to let them know this is happening?
So
know
we
some-
we do to the residential areas. So we do have a team internally that will let the folks specifically in Herald Towers know that there's going to be something happening. And we do that with not just with the commercial
Mhm.
events, but also with our own programming. We like to let them know kind of when those areas are going to be activated so that they're aware. And then of course, we always let all of our applicants know that there's, we need to be mindful and cognizant of the sound we're making over there.
Thank you. So, the application is consistent with, what we've seen before. And again, it is family friendly. It's very short. It's the middle of the day. We do have, I did have, Todd take a look at the language on the public notice, and it's not exactly what we would have expected, and I would like, Todd to speak a little bit, Todd, just a little bit, if he wants to speak on the language of the public notice. This is a public event. I don't know, Todd, but you can, I'm gonna convert a little, we can talk and talk.
Yeah, Todd, if you could speak to I know that you feel quite strongly about the use and likeness clauses, but if you could really keep your comment and question extremely brief, we have a full agenda, so we can keep it short.
Okay, guys, can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so our community board has a known policy of trying to protect the public's right to their own digital imagery. Generally, we adhere to the law and case law in New York State, which requires a written permission to use their digital imagery if it's going to be for any commercial purpose, which seems to be very much the situation here as I interpret this activation. So if you look at the language of the disclaimer, which basically says, if you walk anywhere near the activation, you're giving your implied consent according to our standards and policy. That's not good enough. So I would urge the applicant to go back to their lawyers and, ask them to revise this or give assurances to the community board that if you're going to be using the digital imagery, that you'll change this and get the proper permission from our park goers.
Thank you, Todd. Okay, does anybody else have any questions for the applicant? Tom?
In terms of like cloud control and, are you gonna have like, someone there to help with that? Or do you have like an off-duty officer or something in that effect? Just because, you're doing something in kind of the middle of Herald Square, it's a flow through walkthrough area.
All that's covered in the application.
Yeah, and just they have ambassadors and the park staff will help make sure that there isn't crowd control on top of the already high density of traffic moving through the area. Thanks.
Okay, back.
Yeah, so I have a couple of questions. What is a flash mob? Sounds dangerous.
So a flash mob, it's essentially it's a very expected activation for us, but for the general public, right? They necessarily don't know that it's about to happen, even though we are giving warning 30 minutes ahead of time. We're walking around with signs saying something's coming at noon. We're building up some anticipation, also letting people know that something's coming. But it's just a simple dance routine that lasts, approximately 20 minutes. So they're
So a flash mob is a dance routine?
correct.
Oh, a flash mob, I believe, the general definition is a large number of people
Dancing.
Just
come together.
So it's not a dance.
It's in this instance, it will be a flash mob that will then be a dance, but it is a a large number of people who come together in a designated spot without prior warning all at one time. Like there would be a flash mob at Grand Central, there's a historic, those are not organized and are not for marketing activations to sell things. Those are usually for a protest or an art type project.
Yeah, I was gonna add, usually.
Side the floor, excuse me.
let-
By social media.
Hang on, let John, please
Usually, I was gonna
answer the
add,
question. Yes, thank you.
by social media typically.
Yes,
Because
that
it
is,
Didn't exist.
that is
before.
also assisted it. Yeah, much more impressive prior to social media's existence to have an effective flash mob.
Did John just give another definition? I missed it. I'm trying to-
The definition that he gave was that in this instance, it will be dancers, but it is a slightly, the traditional definition, this is an adaptation of that, but it is going to be a large number of people in one place
Getting together.
suddenly. It's like a surprise.
You all know the size of this little park. There's a big bell ringer in there, two guys smacking on that bell all the time, every quarter of an hour. There's a whole bunch of seats in there. And there's not a lot of room. If you're gonna have, how many dancers? Did you say 20 some odd dancers dancing up?
There will be 30 dancers.
30 dancers dancing it up. I think that place holds about 30 people total. Where are the rest of the people going to be standing whilst watching this flash thing going on?
So the dancers, we anticipate being kind of in the center of the park.
Wait. It's a triangle, right? The park is a triangle, yes?
That's correct.
Okay, right in the middle of that, okay, equal distance from each side, middle, okay? Go on.
And I think we're very cognizant that this is a public place and that there's traffic coming through.
A
And-
tiny public place,
What's that?
a tiny, small public, minuscule, 30 people, wow. I just wanted to point that out to you, for safety reasons. I'm sure Kelly's aware of that, and she's gonna have mattresses against the sharp points so that people might get smacked up against there, but it's a tiny little place. That's my one question. Got it some more. Mayor?
Does anybody else have any other questions?
I would just continue to add that this activation is very short. It's a half an hour. It's kids dancing, and the idea is to move people toward Embassy Suites, not to have a prolonged.
Not to keep them there watching the dances?
Yeah, the dancers are not gonna be there that long.
30 minutes? 30 minutes dancing? Is that what?
It's about 20 total. Okay,
I'm not done with my question.
yes, how many additional questions do you have? We're just trying to get through this
One,
as quickly as we can.
2, 3, and then what about Todd? Wanted to ask Todd if his name is on that Coke can that he's drinking there. Drinking a Coke. Show him, Todd. Is your name on there?
It's a generic can. I'm a big fan.
Forget it then. Bad question. Is Harold Towers the same thing as the McAlpin? Hello,
Kelly.
Kelly.
Kelly?
I do not,
McAlpin.
That's a
I was
great-
brought up at the McAlpin, not the, is that the same building, the
let me just make it.
south east corner of Herald
50 West
Square?
34th.
I,
McAlpin-
let
Is
me,
that
I do not know.
Yeah, Mike, if it can really be attached to the very specific questions.
That's a
pertaining
question,
to-
because a yes or no
But
answer,
to
is a
the-
quick
to the-
question.
To anything that would be
What's the-
immediately relevant
what's
to
the-
whether or not we are going to approve or deny this application.
What's the address of Embassy Suites?
It is the McAlpins. The Herald Towers is the McAlpin, by the way.
Thank you, see, yes. What's the address of Embassy Suites?
Let me get that for you. It is the Embassy Suites Times Square.
Herald Square.
So it's 60 West 37th Street.
Thank you. Well, it's just there. One more. Oh, I can't read my writing here. Craft a Coca-Cola can with your own name, is that what
That was
it,
the
you,
Todd question.
what?
That was your question for Todd.
For Todd, you already asked it.
You already asked that.
Oh, that was if Todd was having a Coca-Cola. What does it mean that the people are gonna craft a Coca-Cola can with their own name?
Yep. So when they come to the Embassy Suites where we're doing the offsite activation outside of Herald Square Park, we have an area set up there where we have Coke cans and printers, and they give us their name. And we're able to print out the label that goes directly on a Coke can with your name on it. So it's just it's a if you bought a Coke 10 years ago, there was a bunch of names on them. You might have bought one with your name on it, and we're just giving people the opportunity to customize their own Coke can to take with them or give to a friend or family member.
Thank you, I'm done.
Okay, great. Are there any other questions? Yes, Tom.
Just on the time, 12 noon, right?
12 noon.
Why
11:30
would you,
or so.
why the time? What kind of picked that time instead of like 2 o'clock in the afternoon? Cause
So
the
the-
reason I
go ahead.
ask is 12 is the busiest time for that square.
That's
You have a
why,
lot of
probably.
people it's a very, very crowded spot at 12. Cause people getting out, that's where a lot of people go to go have work. I just kind of, what is it to get the crowd, to capture the crowd, or?
I mean, the more people that see it is definitely the better. And we are doing the activation till 5 o'clock at the Embassy Suites, and we want to give people plenty of time to be able to come over and create the can. The other thing too, and I know it's a small park, and my partner and I, we get there the day before at like 9 a.m. So our plan is to go over and not alter anything drastically, but we're going to familiarize ourselves with the space, make sure we take into account what it looks like at noon, and we want to give people a good activation, but not be disruptive to what's going on there in the day-to-day life at the same time.
Okay, does anybody have any additional questions? Any comments? Okay, so in the business session, how do we feel about this?
Can I make a motion?
Myrtle, yes.
Can I make a motion to approve?
Is there a second? Okay,
No. I had comment.
Oh, okay.
Point of honor, I raised another comment, so.
though I didn't see you raising during the
Fine.
comment period.
My concern is, I used to work right over there, and I'll be very honest. 12 noon is the worst time to have it there. You couldn't pick a work, it's better, you would be better off at 9 or 5 o'clock where you think it would be busier. But when you work there, it's kind of, the way it is, it's kind of hard to get across, and it's frustrating if you're trying to get lunch and you're trying to move, and it's very crowded. There's bikes whizzing through, and I know bikes are a big thing, but your bikes whizzing through, they're gonna try to cross 6th Ave in the middle of the day when there's all this traffic, there's people, and it's probably the most crowded spot in Midtown around noon. And I get it, like, it's great in the park, but like the movement across 6th to West 37th and doing this at noon to 12:30 where there's very limited foot traffic because of you kind of have that Capital One spaces like that. I just think it's gonna make it a little frustrating for people trying to get their lunch, coming out and trying to walk through, like trying to go down towards Koreatown or up towards 6 to kind of walk through. And that, I mean, that's, I would say, the only negative. And that's why I would say, like, I was wondering why it was noon instead of like 2 o'clock, when 2 o'clock, you might as well be a different part of the city. Where there would be foot traffic, but not foot traffic trying to get anywhere.
Okay, are there anyone else?
Mm.
In the discussion period? Yes,
I
Michael?
mean, I understand and get that, and you're right. I mean, it's just, I guess, I don't know. It is what it is. I kind of, I mean, that's all my comment is, like, you're not wrong, but I think that it anyway, just as we have in the past. It's like no different than like the SpongeBob thing in Granite Park, which was a terrible crowd. I mean, I walked by and it was nuts, but it just is what it is.
Yeah.
But I think it's a valid comment.
And
And
I
that
will.
they should be aware of the safety around, like, making sure people aren't gonna get hit by bikes. So, I think
In
that's-
cars.
Yeah,
I
I think
it's
that's
just,
valid.
and I would say, like, it's just because it's 12 noon where I would have no problems 2 o'clock. I just, like, I remember, like, I've ridden a car, bicycled and walked through that, and that's a main artery at that time. People trying to get lunch, and it's one of the few places where you have a ton of, you have retail workers coming out of Macy's, there's a lot of workers there. And you have the Empire State Building right nearby as well. And that's not it's not
I
a
think-
part where people sit, it's like, it is a throughway for people to walk at that time, just because there's a
I
lot.
think your point is taken. Are there any additional opinions? Catherine, you carried this application. Do you
No,
want to add anything?
I'll acknowledge that. I mean, I think going forward, you can always think that these will come up again and people will be back next year. I don't, I will say that it's in the innermost part of the square, and I do know that there's high density, but I think the people who are there will participate. I don't think that it adds, that much because it's a short period of time. And I think we, you know, we take your comments, and we give it back to them. But I think, you know, other than that, I do think that, it is consistent, it's family friendly, it's young people dancing in the park, it's children, face painting, all of those things, so.
Anyone that we haven't heard from yet? John Harris.
Yeah, two comments. One, in the name of Manhattan, let's not kill the special sauce. I mean, I think this, you know, that this promotes the whole vibe of Manhattan personally, and, you know, there's expectation it's gonna be a little bit more crowded
Amen.
than Iowa, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And I speak as a southerner from Virginia, so I'm not knocking the rest of the country. Second point, I'd just like to make, but we can address at a further meeting, but it is related to this application. I'd like to suggest that we create a document that outlines the legal requirements per the city of New York legal department of what imaging is required. And then secondly, a statement from us of what we want over and beyond that and why. Why is in the interest of CB5 to have this higher standard. And that be written, codified, and distributed in advance to all future applicants. So we won't have to go through.
Have the same conversation, yes.
Yes.
I think that would be great. I think we can get into a little bit of admin at the end, because there are a couple of different tasks that I would really like volunteers to take up.
Okay.
So we can start assigning that as
Okay.
soon as tonight. Thank you.
You look at
Thank
me,
you.
but that sounds like a Todd.
Yes, yes,
But-
but thank you for raising this again. Had some separate conversations about some of the work that needs to get done for the committee. So, Todd, you might be getting assignments later. Okay. Is there anything else that anybody else wants to say? Do I have a motion?
Don't we, yeah, and a motion, don't we have already, 1 to 5, what's it called, Todd? The 1 to 5 thing that we have, the outline
The
of
matrix. yes.
matrix? We already have a matrix, no?
This is separate from that. This has to do with the questionnaire that we distribute in advance of marketing activations that the
Okay,
applicants
so-
have to do. So that needs some work anyway, as far as the formatting too, and some of discussion about how we want to ask those questions and what types of questions we want to ask to make sure that we really streamline these applications, to make sure we still hear them, because it's about the privatization of public spaces. But the more that we can streamline this and take it sort of out of the committee, like some of the other committees have made their bust up applications a little bit prior to the meetings, that it's a little bit standard, so applicants know what to expect from us, and that it's a little bit more consistent on that. From the legal angle, there are questions about it, but having this language be pretty consistent would help streamline some of this stuff. But yes, reviewing our questionnaire. The matrix is a separate thing.
So
which
I
we also
wanted to
need to review.
second that, motion. Did you make a motion?
I did, it's already been seconded.
Already been seconded, but we
I third it.
pulled it back. Okay. A little bit not the exact Robert's Rules of Order, but my parliamentarian is not immediately here. So let's bring this to a vote. Okay, John Harris,
Yes.
Catherine Ellington,
Yes.
Czar is not here. Michael Kback,
Yes.
okay. Isabel,
Yes.
Kim's not here. Charles,
Yes.
Annie. Tom,
Yes.
Todd,
Yes.
Southworth.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, good, you got access. now.
Okay, I just got it.
Okay, great. Great, thank you. Okay, so, on to our next agenda item,
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you
Appreciate it.
thank you very much for coming, and thank you for answering all of our questions. We will definitely be in touch and look forward to the slightly advanced notice flash mob.
Thank you.
All right, always a pleasure. See you guys later.
Okay, we have Paul Evans here from the Parks Department to give us a nice brief update on our parks.
Okay, so, last time I was here, I was, talking about safety in the parks and how, PEP keeps, parks safe by, keeping things in order and giving out summonses as appropriate. So I have a spreadsheet that, kind of summarizes that information. And so basically for the month of March, they gave out, and I'm very, very pleased with this number, they gave out a whopping 240 oath summonses. And that's, the Office of Administrative Trials and Hearings. I guess that's the regular just infractions that people do in parks. And for parking violations, there were 105. So PEP is on the case and keeping things in order.
This is the parking violations around the parks, or?
Yeah, people, if they park on sidewalks, they block, they may block, sometimes they may block the crosswalks. I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
So,
But this is not city-owned vehicles, right? This is just for
this is.
other agencies.
This
Are excluded.
no, this is like, Mrs. Smith or Mr. Jones who did something.
Private citizen, not,
Private citizen,
yes,
That's correct.
clarifying.
No NYPD.
Yeah, because my real question is the NYPD vehicles that are parking.
Union Square, that's-
And in other places too.
No, no, no.
I started, yeah.
Yeah, so it's regular citizen vehicles. So, so an example of some of the summonses given, like there was one at Union, but I'm not gonna go week by week, but I'll just give you an example. One at Union Square for failure to comply, one at Union Square for unlawful vending, one at, that's Woodland, another for Union for unattended, property. A couple of other, a couple others for Union Square for failure to comply, a lot of them unlawful vending, they're keeping that really under control.
Okay.
And unattended property, what I will say is I have some of my District 4, tickets also on this, in the spreadsheet.
Okay.
And so clearly, different things happen in different parts. So I know that, so if you know Bella Abzug, there's a lot of, traffic violations, parking violations over there. Same thing for Chelsea, so it's different things in different places. So PEP is, on that. So very, 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 very good to have that. I also will tell you, so on the syringe issue, because as I think I reported, basically all but one of my staff in Districts 4 and 5 is a certified bloodborne pathogen. And so we collect needles when we see them, and we drop them off at the appropriate locations for having them discarded. What was missing was information from some of the other conservancies and how they actually handle that issue. So I reached out, I got information from Bryant Park, and they have an organization called Positive Health Project that comes periodically from time to time. There's no real set schedule that basically picks up their syringes, and I guess they obviously safely dispose of them. So I'm gonna follow up with that organization to find out what they do, which parks they also visit.
The numbers, yeah.
But the key thing is that, yes, it's apparent that between parks and other nonprofits, that we are addressing this issue. And I'm just curious to know what the numbers are, because we also know that throughout the borough, the numbers fluctuate and go, there's some places are like thousands in a week, believe it or not. So, but that's, that gives you the update on our safety.
Thank
If you
you.
have any other questions for me, I'd be very, very happy to answer your questions. But I'm sure that you're also aware of the many, many events that are coming to the parks, and the picnics and other photo shoots and things of that nature we're well in the thick of it. I have a stack of applications to go through for both of my districts. So parks are very, very active and people are very, very interested.
Great. Thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions? Michael Kidd.
Of course, I have a question. So I've been getting a lot of mail lately about an event that's happening end of April at the Harlem Mere, where they're opening up and inviting people to come see and take a tour for an hour. Can you expound a little on that?
I don't have information about that.
I think, yeah, we heard that at one of our prior meetings. It might have been one of the meetings that you missed.
And this sounds new to me.
This
That
is the
they're
last
having.
meeting.
It's, yeah. it was
We
the
had a
last
whole
meeting.
thing about the Harlem Mere a year ago when they started. all this
They
stuff.
came, the Central
at the
Park
last
came to the
meeting.
last meeting, you
Mike, I
missed it.
wasn't here either. We missed it.
You
We
missed
should
it.
Get together and.
You
look
had a
at the-
meeting without me?
You couldn't come, you had an emergency.
All right, never mind.
But yes, we can fill you in a little bit more on that, and we can also direction for everyone in the public to rewatch our committee meetings. They're all available on YouTube. Some of them are hidden under the live tab. If you would like to review
Without ads.
our riveting, meetings. Tom,
Once again, wow, it's amazing. Thank you for coming and giving this information. Seriously. The question I have is if you were looking for information on let's say Union Square for marijuana, would you be able to kind of get that for like over the last 2 years?
If a summons was
If a summons was issued.
I would imagine, that's an interesting question, what it would be. I would expect if there was a marijuana infraction, that it would be reported. So
In the fall, would it say the area around which and you, like in the, and I don't know enough of the reports, would they say like, for instance, the northwest corner of Union, like, do they identify where the infraction took place?
I would expect that on the ticket, it probably says it. I actually pulled together information from the summons reports that they created. So that information is not on that report that I've cobbled together. But I expect that it's on the ticket, because I would expect that it gives, coordinates. It might give a landmark, or it might say something like.
Yeah, cause it's a big part, I want to make sure there is a load of business. Thank you so much again.
I have a quick question if it's okay.
okay. Myrtle and John.
How many of these summons result in penalties?
Meaning like a fine.
Yeah, or
Um,
some sort of penalty.
The short answer is I don't know,
Okay.
but it's a summons rather than like, it's an interesting question.
Should
That's an interesting question.
people show up, somebody doesn't even show up?
Well, that's an interesting question. So the short answer is I don't know, but when you get a ticket, there's usually a fine. That's usually like, a fine or a desk appearance or something. I mean, I don't know. I will ask that question. It's a very, very good thought.
Thanks.
John.
What is unattended? Can you give me an example of unattended property? Because you mentioned it multiple times.
I will get that also. What is the actual definition of unattended?
Yeah.
I wondered the same thing. I wondered if it was sometimes if vendors like leave some of their stuff.
That's an interesting.
And like
point.
they've gone home, but like a
Right.
bunch of tables and chairs are set
Yeah.
up with like a tarp over it.
I will confirm that that's probably what I was thinking something actually differently, but that's a very, very good point. I will confirm that that's actually what it means, because what I will say is there are vendors that attach things to park fixtures. I will confirm with the definition.
So what did you think it meant?
People with questionable items that they're stowing in the park, but they're there. I mean, it's contraband or things that are inappropriate. So your definition is better. I like yours better.
Definitely curious on a follow-up on whatever contraband may or may not have been found, if there is some details in a report of some kind, if you would bring us a police report or whatever parks report on any particularly of note items. Myrtle?
A very quick question. Is there has anything been done for I don't know, preventing the illegal vendors in Times Square? It's very crowded. They take up space.
I think that's an interesting question. I think part of that is also jurisdiction. The part of Times Square that really is Parks Department property is like Father Duffy Square, which is a relatively small piece.
So is that DOT then?
Well, it could be NYPD, it could be a variety of enforcement, but I would say if you're talking about Times Square, I think that's more of an NYPD jurisdiction rather than park enforcement. As I said, once again, Father Duffy Square is like relatively tiny.
Okay. Thank you. Seeing anyone else online wanna ask a question? Okay. Seeing that, thank you so much for coming. And we look forward to seeing you at the next meeting with some of these follow-up questions.
Yes, which is very, very good.
Paul Evans. Okay. Our next agenda item is the discussion of a rule change. It is a DOT rule change and it's about seating in plazas. So we are hearing this, though both Parks and T&E were given the opportunity to hear this rule change. We are going to hear it. And just as a refresher, the way that this is going to run is that Isabel has taken the lead on the research for this. So she will introduce the topic. She will give us a brief rundown on what the rule change is and some background on that. And because it's not an application, after that, I will then, there are a couple of questions we can entertain that, but I will open it up to public comment. And then I will return us to a business session where only members of the committee are allowed to speak and we can discuss. And if people have additional questions, like for Isabel at that point on this rule change, if there are members of the public that we have additional questions for, I will then potentially open it up if it seems to be an urgent thing. But because this is a rule change discussion, it's going to run a little bit differently. We want to make sure that we are covering all of our bases. I hope that all of you reviewed the materials that I sent around on the actual change itself. And Isabel has done a very amazing job on a deep dive on this.
Could you
which
just
is
remind
great.
us, I know I read all of that stuff you sent, but could you just focus me in on this in a couple of sentences?
That is exactly, Isabel, and with that, Isabel,
I have one thing first, just that T&E didn't
They-
decline to hear it. It could not because we got it after
they were
we got it
noticed
the
on the
day
Friday.
Yeah, we got it the day after our meeting now.
No,
I
it was
thought that
noticed
was
on, we got an email about it on Friday.
Oh, okay, got it. I thought Samir or David had said we didn't have time to.
I think that they already had a full agenda and maybe it wasn't exactly the amount of time because the notice had already gone out, but
Yeah, I think, okay, I just wanted to bring that up.
yeah.
Yeah, so as for what this change is, it's a rule change about exclusive seating. So like if there's a cafe or another kind of business that wants seating, how much seating they're allowed to say is exclusive to their customers. So the rule change is expanding the limit on exclusive seating from 20% of the plaza to 33% of the plaza. And then for major concessionaires, the rule proposes that they be allowed to take up to 50% of the seating. And so, yeah, so 20 to 33 is small. I think 20 to 50 is bigger, maybe something to think a little bit more seriously about. And then the rule change would also allow open streets partners to permit sub-concessionaires on full closure streets. So just for some background on this, in 2020, the DOT proposed a pilot program, which would allow 5 major pedestrian plazas to reserve 20% of all seating for the exclusive use of food establishments and other kiosks. And their goal was to make pedestrian plaza concessions more viable. This was not implemented because of the pandemic, but during the pandemic, outdoor dining was allowed to occupy up to like 80% of the seating in a plaza. This is separate from dining out or like outdoor dining. That's going to stay under dining out in New York City, which is going to be managed separately. They do sidewalk and roadway cafes. The Department of
Could you
Transportation.
talk just a tiny bit slower? I'm having trouble keeping up with reading because I can't hear you.
Yeah. DOT is allowed to enter agreements with sub-concessionaires
Slower, not faster.
who sell food or other amenities in public plazas. And experience with pandemic outdoor dining is what kind of led the Department of Transportation to revise their original strategy and expand the amount of seating allowed for sub-concessionaires under city rules. Sure.
I can't hear that fast.
All right. I'll try
I
to go
can't
slower.
read that fast.
Okay, so I think that our goal should be thinking about how we can balance commercial viability for sub-concessionaires and public plazas with the general public's ability to enjoy the use of public spaces without spending money. Yeah, so kind of what we want to be doing is allowing concessions that encourage the use of public spaces and really importantly, providing ways for concessions to provide funding for those public spaces. The things that we have to consider are making sure that this doesn't lead to, say, like an over privatization of public spaces. We want people to be able to enjoy plazas without having to spend money to be there. And then there's also an accessibility concern. There are worries about, the more seating that's exclusive to a certain area that could limit people's mobility throughout the space. And then a concern about the open streets portion, which is that like the wording of the draft text is insufficient because it could allow improper use of open streets and theoretically block transit while still remaining in compliance. the rule change could possibly mean that like if an entire street, even if an entire street is closed for, sorry.
Let's slow down a little, just a little bit. Okay.
Sorry, it's a bad
Oh,
habit.
wait a minute, no, wait a minute. Can I just say something?
Yes.
Give her some credit. You have not presented here. You're doing fine.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's
Just
fine.
stay with
Thanks.
us. Don't,
All right,
take what you need, catch your breath. We're here with you.
thanks.
You know, and I appreciate the first time. Is this the first time? you're
No,
No, I don't
Isabel,
think so.
also, Isabel's also
Sorry,
trying to
It's just
keep
a
us,
lot of,
Isabel's also trying to keep us on schedule and
I
doing a
know.
very
Yeah.
good job
But
of
that's
keeping us
just
work.
yeah, no, I know, sorry.
Yeah,
But you're doing, you haven't done this in a while, but it's
Yeah.
good. I'm fine, but everybody's not the same. So that's, I just. felt
Yeah, for
like,
sure.
You know.
Okay, Catherine, thank you.
Okay.
Just.
Just,
I
I'm
would say
gonna
is
have
just kinda
Isabel
on the side of
continue.
your eye, watch
Yeah.
the transcriber, because that's what's really.
Okay.
It's not you talking, it's transcribers
Yeah.
having a hard time.
Yeah, okay, so basically it means that if an entire street is closed, you could hypothetically sell the entire streetwide area as long as it's less than 50% of the entire area that's enclosed under open streets. So, you know, we do want to maybe kind of close that loophole because if it's an open street, there should be at least some portion that's just open to the public without them having to buy anything. And so, yeah, so we think that concessions have, I think, or at least I think that concessions have a lot of potential to, and can be used to kind of strengthen, and we want to encourage ways for them to be used to strengthen the use and maintenance of public spaces and possibly see them as a way to generate some revenue for parks or for DOT. And we can also possibly use this as an opportunity to push the city to crack down on cafe creep, the idea that like a cafe is taking up more exclusive seating than they're really allowed to have. And could also use this as an opportunity to just push investment into public spaces in general. Some have like floated the idea of concessions investment fund working with the New York City Economic Development. And yeah, so those are kind of that's some background on what's happening here, and some ideas about kind of the direction that we want to take. I think we likely want to, I mean, I personally lean generally supportive of this, but focusing more on some minutia and making sure that we maintain accessibility for people who aren't spending money to be in public spaces.
So on the 50%.
Yeah, I
that
think
we
the
should
50% is an
that piece.
issue. Yeah.
Okay, so with that in mind, and also with just a reminder for everyone that our understanding is that the money from DOT plazas, unless there is an arrangement worked out with a bid or with a conservancy, the money, and they're different for all of them, the money from parks and the money from events or concessionaires in plazas and parks goes back into the general city fund. It's not like a general parks fund. It's not a general DOT fund. It's the city budget at large. So that's for where all of the city money comes from. So just to think about that, as we've heard in the past about, there's a push for that city sort of trust fund where the events that happen in these spaces should have a public realm sort of overwhelm from that. So some of these go back to the bids as they're cut, but not all of them do. And if you're limiting the amount of that, and then also just something to keep in mind as we discuss this, is that one of our own, especially as our next item is Midtown South rezoning, that one of our only amenities that we really get in our district, that again has some of the lowest amount of public space and public like park space, is that we get pops and we also get plazas, and that is meant to be the open space. That is the amenity in exchange for this zoning change, and that taking away part of that, it's a question for the committee to ask, does that change whether or not we really have an amenity even available to be given if we don't really have that amenity at all? And with that, I'm going to, just a reminder of the process here, I'm going to go to members of the public and anyone who has any comment. And then I will return us to business session where, unless I open it up for an additional question to a member of the public who happens to have specialized knowledge, it is only for the committee to discuss this item. Again, please wait to be recognized by the chair. I promise I will recognize you eventually. And please just prevent the crosstalk and address all of your comments to me. Okay, so members of the public, if you would like to speak, please raise your hand now and wait for me to recognize you. I will promote you to panelist, and please keep your comments brief. Okay, Tom Harris.
You yourself.
Tom Harris.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much. Just a couple of comments. First about the overall plan, then about Times Square specific, and then just about outreach. First, we maintain the plazas in Times Square. The concessions that are in all of the plazas throughout the city are meant to be amenities. These rules, the vast majority of the space would still be available for the pedestrian, and it allows the concessionaires, having a little bit of private seating allows the concessionaires to activate in a more unique and individual way, creating a tailored experience for the guests. It contributes to a positive vibe in the area, and that's really why we do it in Times Square, to improve the pedestrian experience. It does help us recoup some of the costs, but honestly, especially in Times Square with the amount we invest, it's a minuscule amount that we get in the overall percentage of what we put into the plazas. It's really meant as an amenity. Now, our plazas, we have 7 large plazas in the area. The only place that we would have exclusive seating, if this is approved, is in 1/3 of one of the plazas. There's a lot of people in Times Square. We don't want to create more congestion, and the purpose of the plazas is for more people to be able to enjoy it. So anything that we did to restrict the access to the public is not something that really goes along with our overall vision. So we have, since I've been there, we have reduced the amount of kiosks that we have substantially. We only have a total of 5 kiosks, and only 1 will be for food that would have that seating. So really, in essence, 1/3 of 7, 1/3 of one plaza out of 7 would be the exclusive seating. So we are supportive of this. We have not, we were not part of the pilot program, so we didn't benefit from it before. But we think that it would be nice, and just something nice for those concessionaires, create a better experience. And then as far as outreach, we are completely transparent, and I know that you have your own rules and processes, but I do not mind if anyone from the community board or community just asks us about our opinions on things. We are an open book. We maintain the public space, and you are the public. So anything that we do is open for you to ask any questions. And I'm happy to talk. Whoever had the question about vending in Times Square, we could talk offline about that.
Thank you, Tom. I really appreciate your insights there. I did have a follow-up question for you, if you will entertain your chair's privilege. And also really appreciate your openness to meeting about some of our other questions in vending. So you say that it'll only be 1/3 of one plaza. So there's part of this rule change, then the part that our amazing report from Isabel sort of flagged for us is that you say that it won't be the vast majority of it, but if enacted, part of this rule is that for major concessions, it will be up to 50% of the plaza, and that this rule change is to enable the 50% rule change, in addition to the 25 to 33% of the total space, but some of that is a 50%. So I just wanted to speak to that because half is half.
Sure. Here's the way I understand it. And I could be wrong. Isabel might have more information, but I thought it was 50% of the seating within the plaza. But what I would just say is the way our food concession is set up, it's going to be in the 43rd to 44th Street Plaza. Now, there's a lot going on in that space, so we have only dedicated 1/3 of that plaza for the concession. So that's why I said 1/3 of one of 7 plazas. The area by the recruitment station and the flag, we keep open. We have activations in that space throughout the summer months. We have small scale programming that is open to the public. So we do not want our concession to occupy that space. We sort of restrict them in the beginning because Times Square is open to everyone. There are a lot of uses of the space, and we all have to share it. The area to the north on that plaza, right now it's occupied by GMA. It would be our hope and dream that another daily broadcast comes into that space and broadcasts in that spot. We're not going to allow the concessionaire to be in that space. So really the concessionaire is only limited to 1/3 of the space. We're going to have seating in that southern part and then in the northern part when there's not an activation there.
Okay, so only the activations would be the pieces that would take up the 50% exclusive use, but the activations, we generally ask to be open to the full public, and this is the exclusive use of that. I guess that's just the question.
Everything else that we do in those plazas is open to everyone. The only thing that would be exclusive if this rule is passed is the Lambs Club is going to be our concessionaire. So they would be able to have seating that was exclusive to their restaurant. We are going to, by the very nature of the area that we're giving them, it's only going to be 1/3 of that plaza. So the other 2/3 of the plaza will be open for other seating for anyone, for the general public.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. And thank you for coming. Okay. Southbrook has left. Todd, do you have a question? Do you have a question for Tom, or can it wait so that I can continue with the public comment so we can move the meeting along?
It's a question for Tom.
Sure.
Okay. Tom, would you be willing to hang on for a little bit so we can get through the public comment? Would that be possible?
Of course.
Okay, great. Todd, can you hold your question for after? Okay.
Will do.
Is there any other members of the public that would like to speak on this matter? Okay. Todd, you can ask Tom your question.
Hi, Tom, and thank you for the fine work that you do in Times Square, and what you have accomplished over the last 10 or 15 years is amazing, and principally the idea that you keep most of the space empty, and you gradually come around to the important view that the empty space for the general public is of prime concern to you. So I can infer from what you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, the bid, the Times Square Alliance, runs that area under contract with the city. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So you're the ones that are making the decision on the allocation of space, whether it be open space or a certain part carved out for food concessions. So what you're saying really is if you take 1/3 of one of the 7 plaza, and that 1/3 is carved out, then of that 1/3, the 50% would be like 50% of the 1/3 if you chose to allow it.
No, I wouldn't. If the 1/3 is the area that the concession would occupy. So 2/3 of that plaza would be open. So if you took and I'll send a map to Marissa of the plaza that might make this just clearer for folks moving forward to understand what we're doing. But if you just took the plaza between 43rd and 44th and split it in thirds, the middle third would be where this concession would be. So any of the seating, if these rules pass, we would allow the Lambs Club to make that exclusive. The seating to the north and the seating to the south would all be open to the public. Anytime we do programming in that space, the programming is in the space that's open to everyone and unrestricted.
So would it be safe to say that you, as long as the Times Square group is controlling and making judgment decisions about how much space to allocate for dining, there's no way that the Department of Transportation or the city could allow this to go haywire as long as you're managing it?
That is the way I believe it. We have the concession on the space. We control that. Our budget is not, I mean, look, I'll be honest with you. We probably spent $4 million managing the pedestrian plazas. And at best, in our best year, the concessions gave us $250,000. And that might even be a stretch. So the real reason why we do this is an amenity for the public. We think that having food sort of provides a nice environment for the visitors.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay, does anyone else have an additional question for Tom? Michael Hayback.
So how would you, I'm seeing fences built to keep everybody else out except the people who are gonna come in. How would you keep this exclusive place exclusive so the hundreds of thousands of people who walk through Times Square every week wouldn't be imposing on this Lambs Club, very expensive, right? Lambs Club, high prices?
Yeah, it's not that's not the intent. The intent is everything there that on the menu that I saw, everything was under $20. And some of it was a lot less than 20. 20 was the highest price. No fences. I can guarantee you that we want it to be aesthetically pleasing, maybe small planters that would provide that border for the space.
The boundary. For the space.
The boundary, right.
Thank you.
Does anyone have specific questions for Times Square Alliance while we still have Tom online? Other Tom, yes.
Yeah, with the area itself, who's responsible for cleaning that, making sure, you know, there aren't rodents or things like that after, like, is that the restaurant, like, in charge of keeping that area clean themselves, contracting to kind of make that space clean? Or does that go back to the conservatory or whoever's renting it out? Who ultimately has responsibility with the enclosures? I'm just curious.
Well, ultimately, the Times Square Alliance has that responsibility. We will make sure that it is maintained. If the concessionaire doesn't do it, we are going to do it. But within our contract with the concessionaire, they need to keep the space clean. But we have a very visible presence 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we will know if they're not keeping it up, and we will fill the gaps and then hold them accountable for doing what they're supposed to do.
Thank you.
Okay. So, I see no other members of the public.
I have one other question.
Okay, you got a question for Tom. Okay.
Yeah. Hi, Tom.
Hi.
Just a quick question. How does the Times Square Alliance feel about, like, this is a rule change versus overall for the broader city versus like being able to get this specific sort of exemption or change for you guys so that you could be able to do this? You get what I'm asking? The, like,
Sure, I think I do.
But like
Sure,
the risk to us is more other places that might not be as responsible or have the best intentions of the public in mind.
So full disclosure, this was not our idea. We like it, but it wasn't our idea. We did not participate in the pilot program. We have been managing the space for probably for 12 years. We've had some sort of food concession, and it was always open to the public. We do feel that having the exclusivity will allow the concessionaire to invest a little bit more, to have a little bit more ownership of the space, and to create a better experience that it's our hope would make the Lambs Club a destination for people to come. I mean, in the past, any of our concessions were just people would walk by and see them. But we sort of think that the Lambs Club will elevate that experience, and it might be, you know, the latest TikTok phase or whatever it is, where people would actually come to experience the offering there. And that's sort of what we try to do, drive people to the area so that everyone can enjoy it.
Thank you.
Okay. I guess I've got one more question for you on the split. You said that you don't actually get that much of a split from the concessions that you have, your
Mhm.
sub-concessions. I was wondering if you could tell us what your particular split is, recognizing that you are not the only plaza in our district. But and that each bid has a different split and each park has a
Yep.
different split with the concessions, but how that funding from concessions gets woven back into either the private management of the space or
Mhm.
some portion goes back to the city is of particular use to this committee in our discussion.
Sure. So none of the money goes back to the city. I can tell you that. It goes to the Alliance. What we have with the Lambs Club sub-concession and each one of the 5 kiosks that we have has a different model depending on what they can afford. Some of them we give them for free because it's about providing an amenity. But the deal with the Lambs Club, like I said, full transparency, is 15% of the gross. So that is what they will pay to us. They haven't been out there yet. We just did the RFP for the program. The Lambs Club was awarded that, and they should be out there probably by June, the beginning of June. But we don't want to, our goal is not to have a kiosk go out of business because no one benefits. If we gave them the fixed rent and they couldn't make that rent, they'll go out of business. And that's not what we want. Like I said, we want the amenities. So if they do good, we do good. The other concessions that we have a disabled veteran vendor. They pay us about $1,250 a month. He sort of wanted to be in that space. We have an outreach kiosk for the unhoused that Fountain House runs. There's no charge to that. We just allow them to use the space. We have a Broadway Tours kiosk, which we think provides an amenity for folks in the area. He pays us $3,000 a month, which we get half of that, and we get 90% of that. And the Lambs Club, who's going to be managing the overall plaza, is going to get 10% of that to manage it. And then we were inundated with photographers in the pedestrian plazas. They were taking pictures. We had these 360 cameras. So the way we sort of managed that was we entered into a concession agreement with one of them. And by just having one in the plaza, we are able to enforce keeping the rest out of the plaza. So, and we get $5,000 a month from him, which is split with the manager. So as you can see, it's not a lot of money, and we try to be strategic in who we have to sort of fit the needs of the space.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, if no one else has any additional questions specific to Times Square, I'm gonna have Isabel clarify some of our discussion, and I'll move us into the business session now. Tom, thank you so much for staying and providing your insight on one of the major pieces of our district that this would affect.
Thank you very much for inviting me. And if you have any questions about anything, just ask, and I will be at any of your meetings.
Great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate how open you are. I know you've been very open in the past too. So.
Okay, so first on the difference between the 33% number and the 50% number. So this information is from page 3 of the document that Libby sent out, but my understanding of it was that for the majority of the sub-concessionaires, they get 33% of the seating area for their exclusive seating. However, if something is designated a major concession, then it can take up to 50% of the total square footage. So that difference comes down to whether we're dealing with a sub-concessionaire or a major sub-concessionaire. Yeah.
Okay, please direct all your comments.
Sorry.
Please direct all comments to the chair, and we to be recognized by the chair
When I
before.
was reading this, I thought that if
Yeah,
you were
yes.
gonna get if it was gonna be 50%, there's a yearly process.
So Isabel, can you speak to that? I think that there is a process of review where DOT does review those additional sites where it will be 50%. It is unclear based on some of this research that we did in sort of a shorter time frame, how much of the process is actually open to sort of public comment or public review with DOT, and whether or not it's just a DOT process, it's not necessarily like a full, it's not like POPs. Which as a reminder, POPs have to come before us, and in order to have different like liquor licenses renewed, we deal with issues of creep of seating there as well, and that we do require for POPs all of our seating to be open.
The way it read to me is that this is all a DOT process unless, and that for all other spaces where there is no conservancy or situation. So now we're talking about every other kind of POPs. And it's all a DOT process.
So this is a DOT process, and Isabel.
And
can
their
speak a little more.
review, it's for their review and approval.
I think it's for, yeah, so it goes through DOT, but my understanding is that the DOT does have to approve those larger major concessionaires that would be allowed to have 50% of the full plaza. It's unclear how much they would weight community feedback in that process. I think that this is the rule change that they are sort of asking for permission to then be able to review each thing, and we likely would be able to comment at that point, but that was my understanding. Isabel, was that your research seemed to indicate the same? Okay, Myrna.
So the way I'm reading this is, it says 33%. First of all, a quick clarification, there is no 20% out there right now. So it's not an increase from 20 to 33 right now, there's none, right? And then the second thing, the way I'm reading this is, it says 33% of the total square footage of such pedestrian plaza or open street. It doesn't say 33% of the seating available, it says the total area. So if a concessionaire sets up seating and that's the only seating that's available, and it's less than a third of the pedestrian plaza, they can have it all exclusive to themselves. Is that, am I
Yeah,
reading that
that would be
correctly?
that the only seating might be fully privatized and you have to buy a cheeseburger in order to sit down
Right.
in that plaza. And again, it doesn't apply to just Times Square. This applies to any plazas and also, I believe, open streets. Also, again, keep in mind that as we are trying to advocate for additional plazas to be added to our district and open streets, and those conversations are ongoing, that this would affect a larger portion, even if it doesn't affect us now. So yes, the privatization piece of things is certainly around seating and amenities is a different process or a different proposed structure of what would be available. Did I see a hand from John Harris or Tom?
This is my confusion. Thank you, Isabella, for your research, but what about the street plaza on Broadway between 28th and 27th? Because there is seating there and it's more than 20% of the street. I walked by the other day just to make sure I wasn't imagining it.
That's not a private concession. That is just the open street. This is if I have a business and I've entered into a business contract with New York City and with DOT, that's like in any place that is either a plaza or an open street, I am a concessionaire, whether that's I'm selling Libby's peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and I have taken out, I'm allowed to then, this is separate from outdoor dining. This is separate from that process entirely. This is just a concession. So if I have like some parks that feel like parks are actually plazas.
That makes sense.
And there's a different distinction between that, even though it is sort of the park space, which is why it's more of a public realm question. But so it would be that the seating in that area, this would move it to 33% of all the seating of all the space available in that plaza would be mine. And like Libby's peanut butter and jelly sandwich shop has full control and it's privatized, where if you want to enter into my 33% like fiefdom of this plaza, but it could also be, to Myrna's point, that if they're seating all over and I'm privately providing the seating, but that might be the only seating available. And unless you buy one of Libby's peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, then you can't sit there.
So this is this is where I was getting confused with the reading. And so the separation is, it's a self-standing kind of operate, like a kiosk or something like that, as opposed to a restaurant that's doing dining. Like I was confused by the difference of dining out.
So there are concessions in, and Isabel can probably speak to this too, is that my understanding, and though generally in this this is something for us to think about putting into the resolution generally, and I believe that we heard this back in October when Trisha came. The Parks Department is really in favor of trying to expand some of the concessions throughout the city through like the parks. Because, and then also having that money come back to the parks fund. Because unless there's certain arrangements set up, it doesn't go back. So it sounds like for this, for the plaza, the money from these concessions go back. But this is an arrangement, so a concession would be, there are 13 restaurants in New York City parks, and those are sort of the sole operation. We saw one at our December and, February meetings. So those have like exclusive seating, and that's parks. That's a separate type of thing. So this is a concession where a concession can be a restaurant, and that is where this percentage thing kind of comes in.
So just so I can get the definition in my head, and I'm sorry, the reading was a little confusing. It would be like the southwest porch in Bryant Park, but only in a street plaza.
Yes.
Right,
Yes.
privacy.
And as
Not
opposed to
like-
being able so that everybody can sit there, it would be that only people from Libby's Peanut Butter and Jelly Shop can sit there.
Like that area, right? Like as opposed to like the Shake Shack in Madison Square where anyone.
Where anybody can sit at any of those seats. This is the opposite of that.
And as opposed to like the Smith and that block 28th and 27th where there's outdoor seating on the street.
Which is part of outdoor dining.
That's part of dining. All right, so I didn't understand where different things lie.
The DOT piece of it and the outdoor dining piece of it, and then the slow street
Right.
that is becoming an open street. The gradations of what falls under what program is very confusing.
And then when we talk about the 20 and 30%, and once again, I'm just trying to understand because it was not well defined and you guys did the research, I appreciate it. Because my head spin first 3 times I try to read this. Does it count that like, let's say for instance, like that 28th and 27th Street Broadway, right? Which is a plaza street, right? Like, there's no, if there's like a dining out, does that take any concern or no? It's just like, hey, whatever else is happening on the street, that's fine. What we're talking about is that concession, there's no consideration of what else is in that dining out plaza. It's just, if there's dining out in that plaza.
Because the dining out, my understanding is the dining out isn't part of the plaza. But the dining out program is, dining out has to happen in a street. And that review process is with a street versus the plaza concession. So
You see where this is?
it's not an extension, the gradations. Isabel, can you speak to that a little
Thank
bit?
you guys so much, by the way. because
No, of
I
course.
just- Once again, I couldn't understand.
Yeah, I agree that it's very confusing. My best understanding of it is that outdoor dining is in the roadway and sidewalk that's directly in front of a restaurant that's permanent and like a part of the city. And that is managed by the Department of Transportation's Dining Out New York City program. And then outdoor dining in pedestrian plazas and the area beyond the area that's specifically under Dining Out New York City is managed separately. So basically, when we're talking about the plazas here, we're talking about things that are not like directly in front of a restaurant.
So.
Like a regular, yeah, like a
So you're
regular
asking about
restaurant.
I
Like
think
the
that,
difference is like, is Libby's peanut butter and jelly sandwich shop like kind of its own standalone thing within the plaza, or does it have like a storefront and she has like the seats directly in front of that storefront, like on the sidewalk or on the road?
I think some of this gets a little confusing with the open streets. Because what counts as the open street program that's separate, and if it's a plaza where it's a closed, like the way some of what we've been talking about along Broadway does get a little confusing where it's open but not open, and it's just the plaza and it's in front of the restaurant but not. So this is the piece of it that's not managed by that program.
Would an example of it be, and once again, I'm just trying to get defined, like that drink kiosk on 23rd, like when you're going south, because it right now it's separated because there's alcohol and there's ropes to say like this is where you can drink, you can't drink outside, but there's like a wine, beer, food booth that has a little bit of, is that an example?
Are you talking about at the Nomad bid?
Yeah, right by the
Nomad
Flatiron
Alliance
building.
at the Madison Square Park?
Yeah, but it's on the other side of the street, 23rd. It's south of 23rd. There's like a little, like where the art installation was.
Yeah,
The
so
portal.
instead of having that seating be open to everyone, it would be private seating. And so 33% or 50% if they are a major concession would be closed to the public entirely.
And that 50% would be like that whole bit of Broadway.
It would be,
between
it would
23rd and
be
22nd.
depending on how they define the footprint of the plaza, which is a little bit.
That's what
I
I'm trying
don't
to
think,
understand.
I don't have the shape files for that from a mapping perspective. I think we could probably get that to get a little bit more information dialed in on the numbers and how you're measuring the space. Since it's based on square footage and not based on seats. Which is also different. But this would be that 50% of however they are measuring that plaza. And for each one might be separate, where this is part of that same partnership, but this is a designated plaza. So it would only be 33%, or it would be 50%, depending on the type of concession. And that would sort of change it, but you would only be able to sit there if it is, but that's where it's an example of where there's not a restaurant on a block, on a building.
Wait, because like in those plazas, if the bike lane runs through that plaza, do they count the bike lane as part of the plaza? These are the things where I'm trying just to understand.
That's actually a really good point. As far as square footage goes, I am not aware. I don't actually know if they would count that as part of the plaza. I'm not as informed on that piece of it, but we can, that's a
Just want
consideration of it.
definitions, you
If
know?
that's, because if that's included, then it means that even less of
less
the space
time,
is
yeah.
available. Yes, John Harris.
Yeah, it seems to me the issue, part of the issue here is, well, let me ask, are we in question or comment? I'm sorry.
We're in business session now, so
Okay.
just wait to be recognized and direct me, and you can
Um,
say whatever, just
Okay.
all the above.
Is there anywhere where, is there a legal definition of plaza? And it's sort of along those lines, I'll give you two examples. Is a plaza whatever some entity under the New York City government says, this area from here to here and here to here, that's a plaza? Or is there a legal definition of what a plaza is? And then you determine the plaza based on that definition. You understand the distinction? It's like you could have a map. Okay, here's an area that's a plaza. We don't have to define
I think that
what
there,
that means.
I think that
That's-
there is, I think that it's both. I think that DOT
But how can it be?
defines, I think that they define what plazas are, and that's the process they go through to like making new ones. Isabel, did you turn up any research on that?
I mean, I have a definition for plaza, if that's helpful.
Phenomenal. That's very helpful.
The definition for plaza that the New York City government uses is a privately owned open area adjacent to a building and accessible to the public. It must generally be at the level of the sidewalk it adjoins and be unobstructed to the sky except for seating and other permitted amenities. In certain high-density zoning districts, a floor area bonus is available for the provision of a public plaza.
Is that in the document you sent to us, or is this somewhere else?
No, this is.
Is that coming from the POPs?
Okay.
That is from, that's like the
but that-
official New York City
that's-
definition.
That in and of itself is, I have a suspicion there's an entity that just deems this particular space.
That's just like, congratulations, like you're a plaza and you're a
You're a
plaza.
plaza.
Yeah, I think that's what it also, it sounds like it is a privately, I think that is correct.
But
Um,
I don't know, and I don't know who.
I think that some of it is if there's when we turn certain things into plazas,
Because
there
it
is,
speaks to the 33% or 50% issue. I mean.
yes.
Huge deltas, huge
Libby,
variance.
can I speak?
Between, yeah, hey, I see you, Todd. Hold on for just a moment, and John, please finish your thought.
No, well, that's it. I was just saying, depending on the answer to that question, it could be a huge variance of what 33% means in my mind. You know,
Yeah.
if there's a legal definition that you can hold an agency accountable to and say, you've just breached what that legal definition is, that's a whole different ballgame that if the agency is anointed the power to say, anything I paint red by definition is a legal flaw.
Is a plaza, and then it can say something that's not really usable. And so then something can be, it's additional way to create creep, I
right,
think is the
right.
concern with what the point you're bringing up.
I just don't know the answer, that's all.
I think that, yeah, I think having like pretty solid shape files and how things are getting identified, especially in our district as we try to fight for more plazas, is definitely a consideration. Okay, Todd, and then Catherine, I think you had another question too.
Okay, just one quick question. Are we speaking generally about the program or limiting still to the the DOT, the Times Square area?
We are not, we are speaking generally about the entire program. We were only asking and focusing on Times Square because we happen to have our wonderful representative from Times Square here and available to answer questions about it. So it would apply to them, but it would also apply to anywhere else in our district that is a plaza. Some of these the pilot program wasn't targeting anywhere in our district. But it's also a consideration sort of more globally that we really only comment on our district, sort of what it would mean for certain spaces that maybe don't have access to a lot of open space, but that is also us without having a lot of access to open space. And also that the concessions go back either to that specific area or they just go to DOT if it's in a different place.
Okay.
And then again, it goes back to DOT, but not DOT directly. It goes to the general pool of money for all things and not money for open spaces, which, as a reminder, New York City budget still has not funded parks at 1%, which was promised. So just a reminder on that. Money is for open spaces is not designated, even though the parks are raising money. The money goes back to the general fund unless there is an agreement with a bid or a conservancy. So some of these plazas have that with the money and some of them don't.
So I would address my comments to the general proposition of these proposed regulations and their impact. And I speak based on my experience dealing with the open restaurants program, of which I, have some knowledge. As to John's question that we're grappling with, how do you define the open spaces in these plazas and the interaction of the open restaurants or open dining? If you think about, for example, the Broadway open plazas, if you take a walk on Broadway between like 25th and 30th, if you can visualize that, right? The Open Streets program or the Dining New York defines the amount of space in front of an establishment relative to the curb with fixed dimensions, right? So this program is separate from that. So one would think that if you consider the entire space in the public plaza that they're talking about, you would subtract out the curbside plaza from that. And then what's left is the area that the DOT will administer under this program. So, that's what I was trying to get at. So that's the first thing, the general position. The second thing is just, my take on this, if we're going to make comments on this program and how we might modify it or recommend things, is I do think that the 30% is okay and within reason based on everything that we've seen from the way the bids and the bids and other groups that manage the existing public plazas over the years. 30%, giving that over to revenue producing activities is well within reason. The 50% is what concerns me, because that they've created, the proposed legislation is creating, in effect, a loophole, right, where they can increase it. And quite honestly, the DOT, in my opinion and experience, is not a trustworthy guardian or steward to make those kind of decisions. And that brings me to my second point, which is that it's absolutely critical, based on what we've seen with the open restaurants program and with what we've seen with the DOT's ability to manage things like dining of this type, that our community boards, us and the other ones, have a continuing advisory role. And if we're going to comment on how the regs and the law is going to affect this, it should explicitly mention our continuing role. And we know from how they treat us with our restaurants that they barely listen to us. And the third thing is on the period that they grant the concessions, right? So, the concessions, right now it's 4 years for the restaurants. One would hope that this is an experimental process, and one would hope that we would advise in our comments that they limit the contracts that they give out, the DOT gives out for this new plan to something between, somewhere around 2 years, but certainly not 6, 7, or 8 years. And
Okay.
then, okay, that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Todd. I'm gonna actually really quickly, if Tom is still here, I think that he will be able to speak to our question, about defining of the plazas and whether bike lanes are included and all of that. Tom, if you would like to come back and say something.
Yeah, I'm
Tom?
sorry. Can you hear me? My
Yes.
camera doesn't seem to be working now, but can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Sure. Okay. So the plazas are not a land use category. It's actually still a street. It's still mapped as a street. It's just something that the Department of Transportation designates. Our plazas do not have bike lanes in them as part of the square footage. Any bike lane in those plazas is outside of the square footage. I can't speak to the other plazas south of us, but within the Times Square area, the bike lanes are outside of that total square footage.
Okay, thank you very much for clarifying that. Really appreciate that clarification. Okay, and comment, response. Yes, Catherine.
So I just wanted to bring up the way this is written, it does indicate that the proceeds that the city gets, you said it would go to the general fund, but they make the point that the sub concessions and the pedestrian plazas and open streets would be a mechanism to support the actual public space. So in my mind, it would be restricted to that purpose. It wouldn't just go back in the general fund.
It depends on the agreements that each concession and each sort of overall concession. My understanding is that it depends on the exact relationship and the exact contract. So
But for these, I mean, that's what it says.
Okay.
It actually says that the pedestrian, plaza or open street partner is required to invest revenue generated from the concession back into the actual pedestrian plaza, and that they see this as
the mechanism for that. Yeah.
Yeah, public.
Okay.
The other part of this that I'm still probably, I see that the 50% of total square footage of a pedestrian plaza does go through a ULURP process.
If they've been deemed a major concession.
If they've been deemed a major concession, that's correct. Going forward, I think the arrangements that are already.
Yeah, but with the ULURP process, my understanding is that is an example of where we've allowed a building to be taller, like in other zoning things that we have before us, and that the amenity that we are granted in exchange for that and things that we ask for in exchange are things like plazas and POPs. And so that is for like the public use. So this is sort of a question of like, are you allowed to sit in a space? How much of that space is available to you? Like we do strongly believe in sort of amenities and making it easier to add concessions to places, because it is an amenity, it is a nice thing to have, but how much of that is reserved for the private and exclusive use? I think the question that we have is really about the use of the word exclusive.
Exclusive, sure. Thank you.
So how are folks feeling about this in general? Marnell? Oh, hang on one second. Charles, we haven't heard from you yet. Can you speak? Charles?
Yeah, sorry, the prompt came up. I wasn't expecting that. Yes, thank you, Chair. So my comment is basically, I'll try to be as brief as possible. This proposal, I actually received as part of a newsletter. I'm signed up to the New York City rule changes that they send out. I actually did not know it was on our agenda at the time, as our unfortunately our website's inaccessible to me. But I'm glad you, Chair, told me about the fact that it is on our agenda when I brought you to your attention. And I do talk at the City Council on behalf of myself, not as a community board member. And the research I shared with you is actually out of courteous of my own research to prepare me for speaking at the New York City Council. It wasn't, I wasn't trying to step on anyone's toes of who was having an assignment, but I feel I'm going to reserve my comments for the New York City Council as I feel like it's not welcomed or wanted in this setting. Thank you.
That we are very much interested in what you have to say as a member of this committee, Charles. If you have an opinion about what direction this should take in favor or against, please share that opinion now. Charles?
He's not talking to the microphone.
Inviting him.
Tried to-
I'm also, yeah, he doesn't have to, but I'm inviting him to speak because if he has an opinion, the committee would like to hear from all members of the committee. Murnau.
Okay, well, I feel very strongly against this proposal, for a bunch of different reasons. First of all, it's unclear to me if this is gonna result in any sort of additional revenue. You know, if a concession, or a sub concession wants to set up, you know, they can set up, they can have seating. It doesn't have to be exclusive. You know, and whether or not having it exclusive is gonna, you know, bump up the fees that they pay, the city. That bit's unclear to me. The second thing is that, you know, I'm all for public seating in public spaces, right? We don't have enough of it, and one of the ways that we have been able to get it, for example, with land use, you know, every single time there's any sort of an application for POPs, one of the things we always request is if you're operating a concession or if you're providing food, you know, and you have seating, that it be open to everyone. There'd be proper signage saying it's open to everyone. And a lot of times the only seating, you know, a lot of these places will provide seating because, you know, you're serving food, you want people to sit down and be able to eat. And, you know, unfortunately, a lot of times that's the only seating that's available in these areas. So now if you tell them here, you can provide seating, but, you know, you can make sure that nobody else has access to it. They have to buy something to sit down in these spaces. It's a public space. I mean, and we're excluding, we're making the use of a public space exclusive, and that to me does not sit right.
Michael Payback.
Is this a voting thing that would?
This is a voting thing. It's about whether or not we want
Oh, I get
to,
it.
we don't have to provide comment
So I have a
to
question.
make it clear to everyone.
I just, yes or no, is that the whole, you wanna make it quick, let's do it quick. Listen. There was a zoning law passed in 1916 that regulated the shape and the size of buildings and where zones, where you can build stuff. In 1961, it was amended, and it was amended to allow a building that went vertical to not be set back. If you go, as long as that building donated a plaza to the public. So picture now the Metropolitan Opera House that until 1960 was at 1411 Broadway, which is between 40th and 41st Street. It's now 1411 Broadway, but it was formerly the Metropolitan Opera House. And in front and in back of that building, complying with the plaza law, there's a huge plaza. I mean, my tour's there. There's a big button there, right? Big, and on the 7th Avenue side, on the Broadway side, there's a Golda Meir little statue, and I'm seating out there. Can anybody, Libby?
Yes.
Can anybody now go over there and say, okay, I'm gonna set up a kiosk and I'm gonna sell my stuff and I'm gonna pay 1411 Broadway a monthly 10% of all the money that I take in? Is this now, or can somebody just go there and set up on the corner, there's 10 different wagons, coffee and the kebab and this. Is that, what's going on with this? Can anybody go in there and set up a
That's not a-
plaza dining?
Okay.
That's my question. Anyway,
Michael Southworth, I will allow you, please direct your comments to me, but
Yes.
you can answer the question.
To help the chair, and the answer is that those are not, POPs are not DOT plazas. This rule change only applies to a very specific set of things, which are DOT plazas, which are basically parts of the street that they have changed to be plazas.
So it's not plazas, it's DOT plazas.
It's very,
It's.
it's not
yes.
POPs.
It's not pops, but it is also sometimes plazas become parts of what we ask for during various review processes. I'm gonna go back to Charles. If you would like to
Thank you,
share.
Chair. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
So I did analysis of checking out all the comments to the proposed law on the city website where they asked for public comments. And it seems like the community as a whole are not in favor. In fact, they feel that the majority of comments say it's privatizing public space, it's a land grab from the DOT. It would have been nice to have the DOT here because I feel like it would have been good to actually, Chair, to bring some of these comments to their attention. Because I am very concerned that two members of the public actually in the comments feel that the DOT don't listen, that they're not heard, that these public hearings is just a blanket approval. But there was two comments I did want to bring to your attention, Chair, which is which concerns open streets and not plazas. It's the neighbors for Canal Street. They feel that basically they claim that there's hired security by the bars who make sure that people can't sit in the seats and people have to be pushed away and they have, unless they buy a $16 cocktail. And another resident who said that on Dyckman Street, basically the Dyckman, she claims the Dyckman Garden Corporation, who's basically, she says, the bars and clubs, form that corporation. They're letting garbage pile up there and they're not looking after the space properly. So I feel the big issue here is really how the DOT, presents these things and actually engages the community, because a lot of the community have, it seems from those comments, have distrust of the DOT and maybe not quite understand what is being proposed, or have even more questions. But there's like I said, just wrapping up quickly, there's a big difference between an open street and a plaza. When you have a beautiful plaza like Times Square, you have all the space, you have tourists, right? And this, what might work for Times Square might not work for somewhere else. And it doesn't make any talk about, what places would work, what wouldn't. It talks about, it's very vague. So at the moment, how it seems is that the public are not for this. But I think it really should be more of a case-by-case basis. Like I said, for Times Square, it's not so, I think it's safe for me to say it's not so residential, it's mostly businesses and people expect, things happening there, events and things like that. Afterwards, Times Square, right? But if you're some street in a very residential area that's suddenly going to become an open street, I think that's where the worry and the concern is from a lot of those commenters who mostly focused, I felt mostly focused on the open street aspect rather than the plaza. So sorry, wrapping up. Sorry, Chair.
Thank you for sharing your feelings on this. You're always welcome to share your opinions as long as you're recognized by the chair. So just a little bit of a clarification. We did reach out to DOT, but because they are in the comment period already, they aren't speaking to anyone. And that is a flat rule where they don't speak to anyone if they are already in a comment period. So we had some additional questions that we had hoped they would have been able to clarify for us. But that was not possible at this time. Tom.
This is my comment. I'm gonna suggest to decline with comments. What I would say is the two things I would say are lacking is common definitions of. It's written, but none of us are clear what it is, A. And second, and I think the more important, there's not a clear a workflow of how they're going to accept these applications. And how it's gonna go, it was alluded to, but not clearly spelled out, and I do think like something like, you know, SLAP or, and once again, there's a lot of, it was kind of this vague thing, and I just feel at the end of the day, we're all left with questions. It's too vague, it doesn't spell out an actual mechanism for it to happen, it doesn't define what 30% is, because a percentage of something where you don't define what it is meaningless.
Well, there is a clear definition of it, just I want to push back on that a little bit. Isabel did read the definition of it, and then Tom Harris from the Times Square Alliance defined what is in it and what's not, though you are right that we are all still a little fuzzy on.
There were things Tom said that defined it past that wasn't written, and look, I get it, but like something like, you need to clearly define a space, like if you read a law and say there's a zone, there's an expectation that you're gonna define bike lanes, or like, you can't, he has an understanding, and his understanding was great, but that isn't, you need to define a plaza within it, right? Like, we had to do research, all I'm saying is, I would want there to be a clear define of how they're clearly defined in the resolution, how they're saying, this is the space, this constitutes 100%, and this is where we're getting the 30% out of. If there's considerations for dine out, if there's a dine out in the plaza, are there consideration? There's a lot of vaguity to it, and then there's just things that just need to be defined. I at least think so, and that would be my comment. I don't know if other people agree, but and then the second thing is, if you just say like in, you know, these processes, they're gonna go, if there's a, you know, if there's different processes, you know, is there gonna be deal? I just would like it a little bit spelled out, a little bit clearer, what they think the process is, and I understand that there's an understanding of how it would work. And I understand that like, there's a process, but I think it just needs to be clearly defined. So that we don't have a lot of questions, or we have to have someone spend, and I appreciate, and she did a really good job. But if you have a resolution, you have to have someone spend like a bunch of time to kind of figure out what they're talking about. That's not a clear resolution, right? The word resolution means that like, hey, I'm saying this is what we're doing. And I just think that if we add vaguety, you know, like, why are we gonna approve something that once again is vague, and we don't understand how the public is gonna comment?
I think, are the public comment on this, and I think that it is fairly.
We're the comment on the law, I'm saying when they approve, I still not
I'm
100.
having 100, I'm not entirely sure what you're.
I would like the approval, the process of how they're doing it and how they're.
Of how each concession agreement is being,
Correct, and what
when someone applies to be a concessionaire.
And what considerations, like is there a dine out, if that plaza has dined out in it, is there a consideration for, like, there's just things that, hey, how are you going to approach this application? Or are you just looking at someone saying, hey, I wanna build a plaza, okay, you just need to have this much space.
Or even a concession within a plaza.
Correct.
Okay, just
Literally,
to
that
clarify.
is-
It's not about the invention and creation of the plaza. It is about, we're talking solely about the concessions within the plazas.
Correct, the thing that they're looking to sell and approve.
Yes. Okay, Catherine?
Yeah, so, I think we have to, I feel like, hey, do we know how many DOT plazas are in our district?
Isabel looked this up. We have a list of all the pops.
About how many?
I think it's 7.
Okay, so pops and DOT plazas are two different things,
Yes.
right? How many did you say?
We have 7 DOT plazas.
7.
Yeah.
Is that how many were, does that
I think
include
it's
all of the Times Square Alliance or no?
I have times.
Is that one plaza?
Like one Penn Plaza, the
And then
DOT?
Broadway, one.
I think there's more plazas than that. I think
But
there might
that's
be more
interesting.
plazas than that.
So I think what it is a lot of these plazas are, so that's to me where the clarification is. A lot of the plazas in our district are already, have management by, and I think I had said this before, some of the conservancy. So for instance, one Penn Plaza is managed by 34th Street, Herald Square. And then when you go down,
Broadway.
Broadway, some of those are managed by Madison Square
Or
Park
the
and-
Union, or the Union Square Partnership,
Park.
there's a Union Square
Right.
Plaza.
But I wanted to know specifically who we're talking about, and I think Michael did give some some clarification. If we're just talking about DOT plazas that are not managed by these groups, then to me, it's different than,
It's all of them.
well, if it's all of the, it's not, so then we're back to, there's some transparency here that needs to take place. And right, I wanna know about a public RFP process, like if I wanna open up my peanut butter and jelly shop, how do I get a chance to do, how do I get my chance as Shake Shack? That's what this all kind of boils to. I don't think this is revenue producing. It's supposed to be about amenities and maybe a piece of a dream for people who wanna operate small businesses and public spaces. It's all these things mixed together, but there's a lack of, but I think we do say something. I'm not sure how we get to, I don't think we get to, not comment.
I think that everyone has pretty strong comments on this. I think Isabel, put together some suggestions from the beginning of what would be included. So maybe we can go through some of what that is sort of shaping up to be with all of our comments, just also with an eye to the time. Sort of what our comment will look like and whether we want to write a resolution or write about concerns. But I do think that this might be an item where it's a sort of approve or deny situation. But yeah, Isabel.
Yeah, I mean, I would personally support maybe a deny unless, with more of our kind of specific considerations on this issue. For the process of becoming a concession, the Department of Transportation does normally put out an RFP or an RFB, or request for bids. And that's how they run the process for bringing new concessions. Yeah, the Department of Transportation lists 7 plazas in our district on their website. I think there might be more that are included under this.
I think they're more under this program and more opportunities.
Can I just
for
say,
that.
just the Times Square, sorry.
Wait to be recognized by the chair. Thank you, Myrtle. Yes, Myrtle.
This website, I mean, I'm looking at the NYC Gov website. It says just the Times Square Alliance and the Department of Transportation manage 6 pedestrian plazas just in the Times Square area.
Yeah, I think that we have more pedestrian plazas than that in our district, and I think that it's just something to bear in mind. Also, I did want to speak to Todd's point earlier about asking that the concession agreements be shortened. Unlike outdoor dining, where you already have a brick and mortar restaurant, concessions, I have recently been in conversations with folks about parks concessions as we'd look to expand that and really have the funding go back to parks. That some of these agreements, in order to make it viable, because concessionaires are taking a huge risk in opening up. Unlike a private restaurant where the landlord makes a bunch of upgrades, sometimes the concessionaire is making upgrades, as we've heard recently in our recent concession agreement input. But that as a result of that, 2 years is really not necessarily a viable amount of time for any sort of concession agreement, depending on the concession. That would be potentially burdensome, and that the range needs to be somewhat flexible. But that a lot of concessions tend to be a little bit longer depending. There are certainly concessions when it comes to a park, for example, where it is definitely longer. And some things that you think of as parks aren't actually parks. They are technically plazas, even though they are more park-like. Gotham Park is one of those. It's not in our district, but it is a concept and it would apply to everywhere, though I do think we all are generally supportive of concessions, especially as we think of them as amenities. And it's nice to be able to grab a sandwich when you're out with your family and want to do that. I think we're very supportive of concessions generally. But it's the exclusive use element of it that I'm hearing from pretty universally everyone's quite concerned about, and about that percentage level of exclusive use. Myrna?
I guess it's just unclear to me what making the seating exclusive, what it accomplishes.
Yeah, I think that it to my understanding, without having DOT here to argue in favor of it, I think that, and to some of what Tom Harris had said, I think that the pro comments are it would allow for a deeper investment in that concession stand and that area. I think there's also a question of what makes something viable. And that it maybe changes who would be willing to take the risk. This is just purely what the arguments I think would be, is that I'm curious whether or not they're having a hard time finding concessionaires, because either the risk is too high, or it's not profitable, or they can't guarantee seating, so people want to leave. But I am this sort of the 50% exclusive use. I think that I would have to have a fairly strong case for that. I would have to know more of the details of each particular instance and whether or not there's some undue burden on a concessionaire. But considering, to your point right now, there isn't a 20% exclusive use, there isn't any exclusive use. But I think that it might be a little bit more about creating a restaurant type of situation. So that would want to be exclusive, but unlike other concessions. Catherine and then Todd.
So, just to clarify, so we heard from Tom earlier. Now I am looking at what I understand these plazas to be. Does this do something to make a uniform process for all the plazas? And they'll all have like a similar RFP process going forward? Or are the partners, are the concession owners still overseeing the sub-concession process? Or is DOT now overseeing this process? And now I am back to needing clarification
on that. Michael Southworth, in response to that.
Yeah, if there's already an existing bid that has like a larger, broader concession license for like the area, like the Times Square Alliance or et cetera, like they will continue to handle the concession process themselves. But if it's just one of these other sort of designated DOT plazas that are like what we talked about, like, yes, the Times Square ones, but those are going to be run under the Times Square Alliance. But then further down, like you have the Herald Square, which is maybe the 34th Street Partnership, I'm not sure. And then below that, you have the rest of the Broadway stuff and like Flatiron and going down there. And then I think like the 6.5 Avenue transfer
That's the one I was
is the other one that's really in our zone. It's really like, so it's maybe a little more than 7 numerically if you count Times Square. If you count Times Square as 1, then it's 7. But if you count each different zones that they have.
But then in I don't mean.
Hang on.
Yeah.
And so like, so for those other ones that aren't covered by 1, then it would be DOT's normal concession process. And I think that's part of the problem we're seeing, is that even if it's a designated major concession, that would trigger ULURP. The weird thing is that they want to change it citywide so that even this 20 or 30% whatever doesn't require ULURP, they can just do it. And so I think that's.
It also applies to open streets, and there are several places that are now like very long open streets, not necessarily in Arboro, though we are again advocating in other committees on this board for the creation of such open street to turn into a park. So in some ways it will apply to us potentially in the future, and sort of how much control the public has and how much access the public has. Todd, coming to you, and then also would really like to sort of start summarizing some of our points that we would like to see in a public comment, to start focusing towards action. Todd?
Just very quickly, Libby, speaking to your point, the key here is whether or not we as a community board want to encourage building upon success, right? The successes with the public plazas is where they've been managed by the bids, as we heard from the Times Square Alliance or the Flatiron bid or some of the other bids. They understand that if you want to maintain it as an open space, you can't give over more than 20 or 30% and have it be successful. My problem with this, and I think how we should frame our advisory opinion, is to keep the percentage as low as possible, because where the DOT just doesn't understand how to deal with this kind of urban engineering, where they're going to be handling this and giving out these concessions. As to your issue that they're making a big investment, that's not true. The reality is, if you look at the way the bids have handled this, they've had kiosks and seating at a very modest level where they've had it for a year or two or three, and it's been very successful. And if the DOT was wise, they would avoid having anything that elaborate until they see how it works. So keeping it short and then having an advisory role and making sure that we write into the law that there are solid rules about how we're going to comment and the city council is going to comment if necessary is absolutely critical.
Okay. I do want to come back to some of that, but I really do want to focus on getting us to some of the items that should go into our resolution. Charles, is this pertinent to items that should go into our resolution?
Absolutely. Absolutely, Chair. Thank you. I just want to say, I think it's, you know, the plazas are already permanent, and you know, what I think we should maybe put into this resolution is that the you know, that the exclusive seating might not be a good idea for the open streets, because just very quickly I want to say the open streets, when they're open streets, that's just temporary, right? And so if you're a resident, you know, you have a bit of inconvenience if you're not wanting to experience that. So it's even more of an inconvenience if you're told, oh, wait a minute, on your own street where you live, as some of the commenters said on the comment website, if then you're told, hey, you can't sit here because this is exclusive seating, you know, I think that's a bit more, you know, bit of a bitter pill to swallow. So I think with the plazas, you know, it's one thing with the plazas, but I think with the open streets, I think, especially with it being outside people's homes and all that sort of thing, I don't think it works for open streets.
Okay, so you don't think that it works for open streets and the open street portion of this. Some of this is, I think, a permanently open, like a full closure. So it does apply to that a little bit too. But again, it would be the exclusive use on a sort of permanently open street, or an open street for a portion of time, or a concessionaire that is a pop-up in that open street for that seasonality thing as well. Okay, so items, and Michael, if you want to start listing out some of the take notes on some of what would go into our opinion, that would be helpful here, so we can have a summary of what we think should go in.
Sure.
But if people want to start adding to that.
Sure. So, I mean, I think that the top level stuff that's coming out is that we'd like there to be like some transparency about the mechanisms of how this works, that what might work in one place isn't necessarily going to work in other places, and that in essence there'd be like, we would prefer there to be like a more case by case process, and where they're like local stewards like Times Square Alliance or things like that are involved over than like just direct DOT administration, so that there's like transparency, effective management, public benefit, things like that. I think that covers like the main, and the general sense is that, like, as Isabel was saying, I think it's probably like a deny unless there are significant sort of changes to this that could make it, but there is a sense that we would like to be able to enable this in certain situations for certain places where it makes sense. And then the one thing that we hadn't talked about that I just wanted to comment on separately was that, well, actually, Isabel did mention this at the beginning, that there is a loophole in the wording of the open streets thing about the 50%, that like, it doesn't even sound like there's necessarily clear, like pedestrian through traffic and like sidewalk minimums and things like that. Because like, if a whole area is designated, a whole part of an open street is designated part of this, they could take over like half of it and sort of block people from even being able to traverse the street. So it's sort of like, So I would just also encourage us to have something to that effect in there. Do people wanna,
On that,
off of
speaking
what's
about do you want to actually, do you want to make a new file with some language on it?
Um,
So people can look at it visually to what we're talking about?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, do you wanna share the bottom of this that has that?
Potentially, yeah. Oh, right, because you're not a co-host. No, you should be able to share your screen. Okay, but so your point is, I think your point is going to the open street and the accessibility piece of that, right?
Yeah, that was the new point I was adding, also characterizing some of what.
Some of the open street parts. I think that what should go in here for sure is that we do support concessionaires. We want to make it easier for concessionaires in parks in general. And that some of the feedback I've gotten is that it's much easier to go through DOT to get a concession than it is to go through parks, because there's different sort of hoops to jump through, which makes the upfront cost difficult. And these are in places where it is actually an amenity for the public to have a concessionaire there. Like, we want to be able to grab a hot dog or a peanut butter and jelly sandwich when you're in the park with your family, or in the street. So I think this is a good opportunity to add the concession language, but also an opportunity to add some of that language that there's been a big push for, to make sure that sort of generically, to get our opinion in there about we want there to be an open realm fund. Potentially, Isabel, I think, has some language on this too, to be managed by maybe like a trusted partner, on having the split go back between the concession and sort of a general fund. So that places that are not really good spots for concessions can also benefit from sort of the financial benefits of this. And also that I think we probably also want to include that we like public spaces and amenities in public spaces. We want people to be there, which we generally support. And amenities of this sort are a good way to bring people to those spaces. I think Annie might have had some comments that we talked about offline around that too, if you want to speak to that.
Sure, yeah, I think the biggest thing that I'm taking away from a lot of folks, and what was concerning to me first reading this, was the exclusivity portion of this. But really wanting to, from the lens of a Parks and Public Spaces Committee, ensure that we're opening up more areas for people and making those richer. So I think we want the language to be friendly to those concessions, with the caveat of ensuring that it's opening the space to a lot of different people. I think one concern that I had, that I know Isabel highlighted at the beginning, was an accessibility factor. When they're taking up a certain percentage of seating or area of a public space, how can we ensure that they're not just taking all of the most accessible space away from the public at large? So I want to make sure that that's highlighted. And I think evoking clarity from them moving forward, so that we know those that are managing the space aren't going to take advantage in any way, as we're going to give them a certain allowance. But to conversations that have been had tonight, to acknowledge sometimes the percentage is a little bit more than we say when we're in these meetings, or is written down on paper, and really defining what that could be moving forward. So we're opening up opportunity, but we're not taking away public spaces from different people.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that the making sure that we're opening up public spaces in a general way we like, but the exclusive use makes us uncomfortable, and the clarity around who is managing everything. I think we should have language in there about that too. Myrna.
So am I hearing that we're blanket saying no to exclusive seating and not talking about percentages here? Because
Are you full no, or on
I'd be a full
percentages
no on exclusive seating.
on any exclusive seating?
Any exclusive seating, yes. It's a public space. We want concessions, it's great. you know, if concessions feel the need to provide seating, that's great. We want more seating. That's a good way for us to get more seating. But if it's gonna be exclusive, then it beats the purpose.
Catherine?
I'm for communal space and giving sub-concessions the opportunity and DOT to reimagine what communal shared space looks like when sub-concessions operate. And I think what I would like to see is something that charges them with the opportunity to really reimagine. They say themselves that they didn't get a chance to really fully explore all this, and that this needs to be explored before we go sign it off on legislation.
With open streets, Myrna?
Can I pose this language then? How about we ask them to open up any seating has to be new seating, and X percentage of the new seating that sub concessionaire or the concessionaire is providing be open to the public.
So here's what the
Oh, okay. So are you, just to clarify on what you're saying, is that if a sub-concessionaire is gonna have exclusive use of a certain percentage of that area, that some of that percentage, if it's going to provide seating, needs to be additionally providing seating elsewhere in that plaza?
No, so what I'm saying is that if a concessionaire is providing seating, then only for the seating that the concessionaire is providing, X percentage can be exclusive and the rest of it has to be open for the public. That's what I'm saying.
That's what you're, yeah, so you're saying
So
that
new seating provided by a concessionaire for the privilege of operating in an area,
in an area and then having like
having X percentage be open to the public, and then X percentage
for their exclusive
for-
use.
can be for their exclusive use.
That they would have to, so say they take over 20% of the plaza area and they're adding seating in that 20%, that 25% of this 20%
Has to be
is
open.
public,
Yeah,
or that they,
50% of that,
or they're providing additional space elsewhere. I do think
or they could be provided, yes.
an additional amenity to the rest of that plaza.
So that way we're killing two birds with one stone, which is we're getting more public seating.
And you're not losing public,
Makes sense.
Yeah,
Right.
share, yeah. We're not losing public seating.
Okay, how do we feel about the 50% element of this and commenting on the 50% element? Isabel?
I don't feel good about the 50% element. I think that that's too high. I think that if half of the public space is not for public use, then that undermines the point of public space.
How do you feel about the 33%?
I feel more amenable with personally, but like, I still don't think I think it would have to come with strict stuff around what it means for the rest of the space. And also I would be amenable to just saying no to 33.
I'm gonna go to Annie online.
I'm open to 33. I think that 50 is a hard no and should be from us, but I do think that we want to draw a lot more people in to do these concessions, and what they're giving back to the city is significant. So I think giving them 33 opens up that we are willing to engage and make this offering. I think that that's something that we could give here.
Okay. I'm gonna go to Charles.
Hi, can you hear me okay? Thanks, Chair. Just clarification of something I just want to bring up, if you don't mind, Chair. So the concessionaire, are they someone, for the clarification question, are they someone who already has outdoor dining or seats outside their restaurant? And then if they're going to have 33% or whatever it's going to be, then of the public seating, is that in fact expanding what they already have? So in a way, they're double dipping. And then the other question, the other comment I just want to make, because as you know, with being blind, I can't really make notes, so I have to use my memory, is that earlier on the city website, people did make the point, members of the community made the point that they feel it makes a two-tier system where if you can afford the, $20 cocktails or whatever, or the, that kind of price range, you get to sit. But if you can't afford that, then you can't. So I just want to know, could we put some language saying if someone just simply wants to have I don't know, some like if they just want to have a cup of water, which usually is free, you know, in the restaurant, you know, that, you know, they would be allowed to sit, or do they, you know, do they actually have to make an actual purchase to be able to sit down? So I just want to be sensitive to people who are low income. If they can't afford those prices, you know, it's just sad that then they're not going to be able to sit there. They have to find somewhere else to go, if you get what I'm saying.
Yes, no, I think your point is well taken, and it's consistent with the opinions coming out of this committee previously that the affordability and accessibility from a financial standpoint is a thing. I do think that acknowledging that concessions are in fact amenities where you want to be able to buy stuff, but not have the airport captive audience problem where a bottle of water is $8. That's certainly come up in other concession conversations, certainly come up in ours, and the exclusive use of a space in addition to the concession. But I think Annie's point is also well taken, that we do want to draw people to some of these spaces and make it a little bit easier, as long as it comes back into that designated fund for open spaces and not a general to improve open spaces. But John Harris, you look like you want to jump in.
I didn't raise my hand, but no, it's just, well, I'm hearing different philosophies here. Like I'm beginning to hear people say that these concessions are like privileges that people are clamoring to have, and we can opine what you know, what responsibilities they have and what they can do and so forth. I guess the missing piece for me is this a supply and demand issue? Man, I don't have a good sense for that. Because maybe to attract some of the concessions that we really want, you have to provide an incentive.
Yes, I think
Right,
that
and it
is.
seems to me that's been lost in this process, and I'm aware of the equity issue. Having said that, you know, this is always the tug, isn't it? It's the efficiency and the business aspect versus the equity aspect. So, but I'm thinking 30 some percent sounds correct. Maybe to go further up, they have to be they have to provide additional concessions. I don't know. But let me throw out one idea. I don't know whether it's already built into the process or not, that these concessions be required to provide the additional seating. So if there's a space
and they have, say, 33%.
33%, they're required to provide free seating, additional seating.
If they are themselves benefiting from the exclusive element, that then some portion outside of that exclusive element, they would also be responsible for providing funding and
and maintenance.
And
maintenance.
Right.
But that's the other issue.
I'm
Sorry.
thinking, that's what I'm thinking. And then another piece I'm thinking, that instead of getting into price controls, and I'm aware of the airport issue, because that's very, in fact, it's cheaper now than just to belong to a club.
Yeah.
Exactly. In those places. But you can make sure that the concessions you approve are at different price points.
Yeah, I think there's probably language that
And
we
then
could
that
ask for.
manages the price issue. I'm not comfortable with price control necessarily. I just don't think it works. It's not a philosophical issue. It's just.
But you're saying that there would be, in telling DOT when they're considering concessions, to consider the full, like the diversity of concessionaires and what the price points are, to make sure that it is accessible to the. There's a diversity of options.
And that diversity of options, but it also keeps businesses in check, right? Because if somebody's charging, you know,
if one is a fancy one, then someone else should be able, then they would only pick one that is more affordable.
Right, but but that puts a limit in my mind on how expensive you can go too, right? If I'm charging $20 for a cup of coffee and there's a place right beside it that's charging
$3,
$3, at some point that's gonna
Okay, but so,
That process in check.
okay, but some language around the accessible is the widest number of people, I
Right.
think.
Anyway.
I think some language around that, and then I think some language about if they're going to benefit from the exclusive element.
That's the core thing I was really thinking
Yeah.
about. Maybe that's the element that, that they can have the concession, but there may be either some additional responsibilities beyond their footprint. Or if they want to expand, or maybe you could say they're entitled to 20, but if they want to go to 30 or 40, they
Yeah.
have to maintain seating.
That brings up an interesting point too,
Yeah.
about the 20%. I see you, Todd, but I'm gonna
You see me
take,
too.
I do see you too. I'm gonna take some comments from the room, but again, focusing on what we're gonna put into this. But what I'm hearing is that maybe we're okay with a 20% exclusiveness. Myrnall's a hard no. Okay. Would you be okay with a deny unless just no exclusivity at all?
No exclusivity.
Under any circumstance,
That's right.
okay. Okay, we've got some people who are okay with a 20%, I'd say 20 or 20,
Yeah.
20% or a 33%. We can take a straw poll on that in a minute before going to a couple other comments, but, okay, Myrtle, speaking to the exclusivity piece of it.
But yeah, I mean, also, when we talk about 20%, 30%, this is the area we're talking about. We're not talking about seating.
That's right.
Mhm.
That's exactly.
So
That's
that's an issue. If that's the only seating that's available, then there's no seating that's available. And so if people are not making a purchase, you're not sitting down.
Yeah,
Even though they got,
because it's the full area and that might be the only place with the seat.
Yeah.
But if they have the responsibility to.
Yeah.
To then
more
provide
seating,
additional area.
Then that addresses that issue.
Which also then brings us to another issue. Well, here is my seating. I make it all nice and all, and
Right.
here is the seating I'm supposed to provide, and I
So it
don't
would have
really
to be
have to deal
comparable
with it.
seating.
Yes.
The same thing. Okay. But even in that scenario where if they are providing seating in their exclusive area, that even if you're a hard no on the exclusivity, but other people want to put that in, that we're okay with a certain percent.
Well, who's gonna monitor that, right? I mean, if it's in the same area and then you say, okay, you can keep 20%, and put down your, white tablecloths and the rest of it is open to the public, and that's how we know it's open to the public. Who's gonna monitor that, now there's creep and now they're using up another table and a third table?
Okay, okay, Todd, you've had your hand up for a while. Speaking to specifically the exclusivity, hard yes, no on that binary. Also, the element of the idea of adding additional chairs as an obligation that they should consider if they are going to give exclusivity. And any other items to be included as a point in this resolution.
Yeah, so I'm in favor of whatever the committee can agree to between 20 and 30%. I think that historically we've agreed to that with the bids, and we've seen it work with success. The DOT is going to go ahead with this in their managed areas, but it's historically consistent with what we've done. And I don't agree that there should be no dedicated seating. We're just bowing to reality. I think it's important that they do have the flexibility to do that. And I'm in favor of, most of the comments that have been made so far.
Okay, I really want to focus this to make sure that we still have one more item, and I really want to get us out of here as soon as possible. I do think, and Isabel, correct me if I'm wrong, that we don't currently have with the exclusivity with the bids, other than restaurants, that all the seating and bids and pops does need to be open to the public.
what are you saying?
Unless the restaurants. That our demand in pops is that the seating has to be accessible and open to the public.
With
even
proper
if
signage.
with proper signage, even if there's like a concessionaire there, the seating for like Shake Shack is not exclusive. But we are also saying that the exclusive seating element of this, some members have recognized that might be the draw if it is hard. We have heard that. I have heard that feedback that from some concessionaires, it's hard because of the risk involved, that it's an easier process for certain reasons to get a concessionaire in the DOT process, and the requirements are less red tape to get through. But I don't know how much of an element of the exclusivity of the seating because that is something that parks usually do insist on unless it's inside of a private restaurant. That is the concession in the private restaurant. You can't walk into Bryant Park Grill and, you know, just sit there and hang out and play bridge. You have to, you know, have a cheeseburger or something. But I think that if we can start consolidating this into, I'm not sure how much of that. So, and I would love to get us to some element of clarity here on, we want more clarity from DOT on the process. We want to encourage concessions. I think it's a good time to advocate for the general public fund thing that we've talked about, unless anybody objects and doesn't want money from parks to go back to parks, or plazas here to go back to either that plaza with like an 80-20 split is something that's been floated by policy people. A split to that, that location gets 80, and that the other 20 goes to sort of general distribution by maybe a trusted steward, that there's certain locations that are public spaces that are not amenable to a concession. They're just, wouldn't be able to support it, but money from a concession elsewhere, that's like sort of an equitable.
The program.
There's sort of an equity element to it of some places just can't support. No one's gonna go to a beer garden in some places, and some places wouldn't support the business for it, but the places that can't have a concession should also benefit from a public fund because we are underfunding our public spaces. Some of these, the ones that we're talking about, already have that through this private thing, but again, I really want to focus on an element. So is everyone okay with that being an element? Even if you're not okay with whether the exclusive or not exclusive piece of it, and even if you're voting no to any exclusive element of it, would that be something that you would also want to see in a resolution? Show of hands, general assent.
Have a comment on the exclusive?
Yes.
What I would say with the exclusive and non-exclusive is they would need to have I would prefer they have to have a reason for having exclusive. And the reason why is they shouldn't have wait staff. It's a concession stand, right? So the only real reason would be alcohol, which I would say like, all right, that makes sense. You would want, and then in the case where you have a defining reason for exclusive, which I think the main thing would be, you know, alcohol, because you would want to mark off an exclusive area for alcohol. You wouldn't want minors. Then they would have to provide not seating outside of that range. But there are reasons why exclusive makes sense, but for a majority of these stands, it wouldn't, right? Like if you don't have a liquor license, I'd ask why. If it's just like, oh, there's too many people, and then it's like, well, maybe that's not a good spot to have exclusive sitting if you're saying there's too many.
Okay, so where are we feeling on a straw poll from deny unless, yes, with conditions? I think we're probably all either deny unless at this point as like the rule. And then where are we on exclusive being just out? Like we'd be okay with, we want to encourage more concessions, but under no circumstances do we want any exclusivity? Can we get a straw poll of who is a no unless they take out the exclusive use, which is really the entire rule change is purely on exclusive use. Who does not want any exclusivity language at all? Nothing exclusive. It's about 1, 2. Folks online, can you chime in verbally, please?
May I make a comment?
On the language?
Yes, specifically on the exclusivity, would you support anything, any percentage if there is a percentage that is exclusive?
I'm sorry. I was just thinking of the word itself. I think that's where people are getting upset is when you say exclusive, it makes you think, you know, everything. Really, they should change that language to concessionary seating would at least be better terminology.
Yeah, I think it's also just sort of the amount of space the concession can take up. So, but are you a yes or no? Would you vote for this if the exclusive piece is still in it, or would you not vote for this if the exclusive piece is still in it?
You mean the percentage of the seat? Oh, sorry.
Give us feedback too. We like consensus here, so. Charles, are you, so Charles, I think you're a no if there's any amount that's exclusive. That maybe can be persuaded otherwise with some percentage.
I think I would go with the feeling of the committee. That's how I feel. I would go with my fellow committee members. I don't have a strong opinion.
Okay, so we've got a lot of people who are sort of in the middle. Catherine.
So let me say a few things about this exclusivity as we talked about it. For us, context matters. All of these plazas that we're talking about are stewarded and governed by, have guardians. They're not DOT plazas. In other places in the city, they're straight up DOT plazas. And what has been our experience? We spend a lot of time with parks, with parks explaining to them if you're gonna have an event, you still have to preserve your public your public seating. What this does is gives them some backdoor tools to create more exclusivity in what should be a public, we shouldn't have to renegotiate public space that is public space, and that's what's happening. And I don't see how we get around that in any way.
Okay.
I've sat here and tried to, and what I will say is whatever we resolve, we need to resolve that in CB5, these are the 7 plazas from which our experience is speaking. What I will say is there have been pop spaces where we're doing a lot of policing, where the pop space is managed by the business, and the business is running their own private events out of the public space, and we're asking them not to run the private event.
I think your point is taken that we already have CREEP, which is Bell spoke to. So we have two committee members who are really hard nosed on any exclusivity at any percentage. Does that change anyone's say like a proposed thing would be in Southwark? I think you're probably going to move something here, potentially.
Well, I was just gonna say that the easiest way around this is that what DOT is proposing is a rule change globally. So we just say, we don't support a rule change.
A rule change.
It's just that.
We don't support a rule change
And that we're.
here, and then here are our
On a
concerns.
case by case basis, we could look at something like down the line that a specific thing in not Bryant Park.
In CB5.
Yeah, that
Times
like
Square.
for Times Square, if they want to do this, I don't think saying no to the rule change would preclude that from
Us making an
becoming a
exception in
possibility.
I think
Yeah,
that's
so
I think that's a
the
nice way
easiest
around
way.
this as a rule change while keeping us open to if someone made the case to us specifically for a specific thing.
that we want all these things. We'd like to encourage better and cooler concessions and.
And we want to open up to variety, but the exclusivity makes us, we have very strong concerns about the exclusivity, though we recognize that some concessions want, to attract certain concessions, we recognize there might be certain business elements to it. And in which case we're open to seeing that on a case by case basis, but the rule change is concerning. And then we can go through additionally, we want this 80-20 thing. This is a place for us to kind of get that on the record, to have that happening in places where that's not happening in other DOT open streets situations where it doesn't go back to a bid. It in ours it does, but in other places it doesn't.
I think we can aid with this 80-20. From what I read, and I think we should reiterate that we see this revenue as specifically restricted to go to maintaining and repairing the plaza itself, that it doesn't just get lost. It's not a lot of, it's chump change from what we can hear, but it should be transparently going to a place. The other part of this, I guess it turned personal for me because I do remember, and I'm glad, I think Mike Kayback had this experience. You could be sitting in one of these parks and you have to know that the park is public.
It's public in order to be.
Because somebody's walking up to me telling me that I can't sit here, right? And I've had that experience, right? More than once. And so I don't need to have that kind of experience in a park at all.
Yeah,
in a public
and this is in a public space. So this is a broader realm. I think the 80-20 thing, my experience comes from a more very specific park concession element, but I think that going on record, just advocating for that, the way that we advocated in a lot of DOT resolutions for the officer.
But we do believe in the imaginative process of sub-concessions and making this a possibility.
Okay, so that would get us, and that then we say we are a hard no on the 50%. I think most people agree with.
Why even go there?
Why even go there?
I don't
Okay,
think we need to
don't,
get
we don't have to go there, we just do it
Yeah.
on the rule change, is
Yes.
that, okay, so are we ready to make a motion?
That's it.
Are we ready to make a motion that I cannot make a motion as the chair, but Charles, do you have one last thing to say about this structure? Make a motion.
Yeah, I just want quickly, sorry, I just want to know, I'm just worried about enforcement, who would be telling them they can't sit there? Is that, yeah, and if they don't sit, would the police be called and would there be escalation? That's what I was a bit worried about.
I think we can,
That's
I
just
think
a
we can,
whereas.
I think we can add that as a whereas. I think it's a great thing to add as a whereas. Did anyone else have any other whereas clauses they would like to see added?
I'm confused.
Anyway, we're gonna say, so right now, we're writing this as a deny. Just a straight flat deny is my understanding, that everyone is a deny on the basis of this shouldn't be a rule change. Though we like the idea of concessions, we want cool concessions, we want people to be creative, we want to be welcoming to different types.
One more seating.
We want more seating in our district, that this doesn't really apply. In some ways, it might apply in the future. We recognize that. So on a case-by-case basis, we are open to the idea maybe of it being a thing, but as a rule change, we don't like it. John Harris.
Two things. I'd like to hear what Todd has to say about this. And number two is point out another concept. Is it possible to say that we're in favor of a limited rule, but then mention the areas the rule does not, to which it does not apply? And that would address your concerns. We could say it doesn't address to the conservancies and the bids.
Well, I think the rulemaking itself empowers them.
The rule itself,
whatever
the
they
rule
want.
itself
A
gives
little more of
DOT,
what they've been trying to do anyway.
and so it's a
That's not
DOT
necessarily
review.
good for the public.
Because there's certain ways that enforcement, even in our POPs, like we have that where we won't renew a liquor license sometimes.
I
and
think,
stuff.
right.
But I think that maybe if we ask them to come on a case-by-case basis, that like we are hypothetically okay with it in the case, like we are amenable to a case being made
Right.
for
Yeah,
it.
it's gotta be clear that we are in favor of the rule in certain
With-
contexts.
In certain contexts, we're in favor of it, but as a rule change, we don't like it being a rule change and a
Right.
flat rule change because the exclusivity, we want spaces to be open, especially since this is like an amenity that with our land use stuff and all the things that we've said. Yes, one more.
Thank you.
Todd, have an opinion?
Yes,
Great.
you know, my own, I will defer to the opinion of the committee. But my own personal opinion is I would go back to what we heard originally from that it should be a deny unless. I think that historically, the committee has always tried to, be strong in its opinions. I think it should be deny unless, and that the reservations we had about the exclusivity and the percentages and the other comments that have been made up should be included in that. But I don't think, by saying we're denying it, I think that's going a little bit too far.
Okay, I think that the deny unless structure, I think that there might be a way to get that back. I think that to Murnau's point, that having any rule change, that means that having any discussion of the percentages by objecting on the rule change element, which is how this whole thing is structured, then it would just be a deny unless it's not a rule change. But I think the point of how we got to consensus was to not include the percentages.
Okay.
That we're not even gonna get into that piece of it, just exclusivity. We could be convinced on a case-by-case basis, depending on the context. And then we cover everything else that we've spoken to. Does that make sense? Todd?
Well, if that's what the committee thinks is best, then we should go with that. I'm sure there's a way, if we wanted to do the deny unless, we could go through a few drafts on that. But remember that the DOT is going to do this regardless. They have, arbitrary power, even the way things stand now, to do what they want with these plazas, right? So our most effective advice is to work within at least a portion of what they're proposing and put down solid borders, like.
Yeah, we're gonna add all the comments of the pieces that we don't like about it. I think we can add a line maybe that the committee somewhat universally was very uncomfortable with the 50%. I think that we can say that specifically. Okay, I see your hands, Tom and Charles. Do you have very specific things to very specific elements of this? Because we still have one more agenda item that is very important, so we need to
I
get,
don't wanna talk until the discussion is done. I'm just was gonna do the motion.
okay, Charles.
Yeah, as I'm meant to, as we're meant to represent the public online from those comments from the New York City website, which I sent to everyone, a lot of people are against it. So regardless of how I feel, I do have to represent the community, and I would say definitely a deny unless I would be with my other two committee members on that thought. If we were going to go back there.
You are on with the deny unless structure, but I think we're saying a flat denial on the rule itself, because it's a rule, and that the only way we would support it is if it's not a rule change. But the point is that they're making it a rule change. And so we're objecting flat out to the rule change. Is that the structure, Michael Southworth?
I think that, yes, I think this is a semantic drafting question
Issue, and we
that we
can,
don't need to talk
and
about.
we
that
can
do-
circulate that.
We can do a deny unless that is still
Do you feel comfortable with
completely
that? Yeah,
strong
feel great about
about
that.
the exclusivity and explains why, explains it clearly. I think we would be okay, and I think we'd be able to satisfy your.
Without that, okay. Isabel, you will be drafting this, right?
Yeah, I'm happy to.
And Southwick will send you what he has taken notes on. John Harris.
No, what are we voting on? Deny unless or deny? I'm confused.
Michael,
I think we would be voting on deny unless.
Okay.
and figuring out some
And-
semantic way to have that.
Yeah,
happen.
deny unless so that we can include constructive criticism that they'll take, and
Yeah.
but that we can also be very, very clear about.
We deny it. We deny unless we make this not a rule change. Can be one of the first things, which is the entire thing, which is the
Right.
equivalent of a deny. So it's just, it gives us the space to say a couple more things.
Then they'll do what they want.
And then
Yes,
I'll do that.
okay. Charles, I see you. Do you have any one last whereas clause that you would like to add to a deny unless in the structure that we have just specified?
I was just gonna say, maybe we could encompass some of the comments that the public have made, if that's possible.
I think though I appreciate that intention, they have not come to our meeting specifically to make a public comment, and we have not received any comment from the office. So as it's the public comment period, those live elsewhere and outside of this committee.
Got ya. Maybe then ADA compliance. for
ADA
those-
compliance, we can,
That
I
would
think
be-
Isabel,
That could be a whereas.
that can be a
Very
whereas, that's already Isabel's presentation included that at the beginning too. So all of that stuff from the top, which I know was a very long time ago, will be included in this resolution, which Isabel will write and then circulate to everyone. So everyone's very, very clear on that.
Motion,
Yeah, just.
Tom,
motion, whereas it is resolved to deny unless the forthcoming conversation offered by Isabella from the notes of the secretary.
fantastic, okay, cool, let's take this to a vote. John Harris,
Yes.
Catherine,
Come back to me.
come back to you?
Yep.
Okay. K-Back,
Yes.
okay, Isabel,
Yes.
not here, Charles,
Yes.
we lost Annie, Tom Ricardo,
Yes?
Todd Shapiro,
Yes.
Michael Southworth,
Yes.
and Murnau.
Yes.
No. No.
You're a no,
I'm a no.
okay, and you're a no on, just so that I can then present this accurately, that you're a no for, because this is the rule of, we're gonna say in our deny unless it is not a rule change.
I think it gets closer, but I don't think, so. What's?
It's not as hard of a ban on the
What
exclusive use as you
it
want.
would be that, yes, it gets us closer. I do understand, and Todd, and I've been reminded here that deny unless gets us to the table where we don't close the door to DOT.
But the exclusivity is still,
But the exclusivity issue is a real issue that has to be, I mean, Anyway.
No,
so-
that is, your vote is totally valid. I just wanted to make sure that I had that so
Not
that
often, but
I can present
it's
it better.
important. It's-
Myrtle,
Can I
are you?
clarify my vote too?
Okay.
Because my understanding is that they deny unless there isn't a rule change, is the same thing as a flat out.
It's flat out, no,
deny.
it's like, we're
that
denying
not-
it unless they
okay.
don't make it a rule
This
change.
is a semantic
It's
thing.
a semantic,
Doesn't matter.
trick that really is. We're saying that the entire thing, we're commenting on a rule change and we're saying the thing that you're asking us to comment on is a rule change and we think there shouldn't be a rule change.
Right.
So we're denying unless it's not a rule
So it
change.
should really be a
And then
flat out
And then
deny.
it's a case by case basis. Well, because it gets us the ability to say, we do think that in certain circumstances. We could be convinced if there is a movement of chairs, if there is an additional contribution of some kind over and above this exclusive use and this exclusive space.
We're not opposed to the thought, we're opposed to the rule change. And that's what we're trying.
So
to
that's a
And having
deny.
it, and have it be blanket.
So that, okay,
We do
in
have
my
to-
mind, that's a deny, but.
We do, okay, but does that make sense? It's a little weird and
Yeah.
Yes.
yes, but I think that is the understanding of a lot of people with why it is a deny unless, and I will clarify that
Is
in
they
my.
can circulate it with enough time for people.
Yeah, we'll circulate it to make sure everyone is comfortable with it so that they feel okay at the thing. Isabel will write that up.
Happy to take any.
Phenomenal.
That's why
Okay.
I wanted to reflect the genuine consensus.
Yes,
Sorry to have to head out, everyone.
okay, yes, so the next item, thank you all, so the next item is the points of agreement, which I circulated for the Midtown South rezoning. So what's going to happen with this and what our chair, Nancy, has asked us to do is to provide, points of agreement. This is important to both Nancy and to Julie, that attached to, and Myrtle can speak to this too, since you were on land use specifically around this, that we want to have points of agreement. And that's what our elected officials and our members of city council go to when they look at this. And there are ongoing conversations with those city council members. They've already begun to discuss that. But as they go to discuss that, it is good to have an idea early on, which would be now, for what those points of agreement will look like, especially as it pertains to parks, which is a lens that we've been asked to look through. In the future, not for this cycle, but in the future, we are probably going to have sort of a blending of something that's already come through T&E and that's come through us to more specifically get into the weeds on what we want our electeds to do. We have a little bit more time with the specifics of the points of agreement to build it out. But as it relates to the specific things that are discussed that pertain to parks in this points of agreement that I circulated, and we can go through a little bit more. It's some of it's under 0.5 about open space and public space. With this rezoning, this is only for additional things we would like to see or things that we want taken out, how we are feeling. Again, we will have more time to comment in depth at a future date. But this is the element of that.
Question.
Yes, Tom.
I know 5's where we're focusing, but I did have a question on,
There's some other things that we can talk about too, sustainability and that
alright,
kind of
so
thing.
yeah,
Yeah, it's not super narrow, but again, the lens of parks and open public spaces.
correct, so what I was gonna refer to is 3.2. Which
Okay,
is the SBS storefront startups, like the pop-ups.
where,
Small business and retail protections, the expanded space opportunities for nonprofits and art and cultural uses such as funding for storefront pop-ups. And SBS storefront startups.
because we want the pop-ups in a park.
Yeah, like we wanna. A lot of the installations we have in parks are run by big businesses and we wanna encourage small, I would think, I'd feel strongly like. To give the same opportunity for Paramount and Lego that we would give to a small business and to encourage that usage as well. In the installation, like
Okay, so you're just expressing support of 3.
3.2, but also saying like
Okay.
there's a parks element to it where maybe it would be. Something in terms of, we make agreements with installations.
Some of that stuff will be addressed outside of when we look at when we start to revisit our matrix, which maybe you might want to be on our matrix committee.
Okay.
Okay,
But you know what I mean, like I think first was asking, is this relevant, because
Yeah,
it could be a
yeah.
space, And my second is the focus on that would be, encouraging, finding a way to help encourage within that park space, so we're not just, letting the installations go to larger cultivations.
Okay,
Whether that's like
If there's a
carve out for
consideration.
extra
okay,
installation just in that SPS space.
okay. And so just for everyone who doesn't have this immediately in front of them, running through in the open spaces part, it's fully funding Broadway Vision from 23rd to 40th Street, Greeley and Herald Squares. That's Broadway Vision as like currently exists. That is not the same as the linear park that has been floated so far. I think that we should push for a little bit more on linear park. I think that this is a great opportunity to do that. I think that we can add some, this is again, the general language. We are not getting into the weeds, but I think adding fully funding it. It does include making it a plaza at some point, which is part germane to our prior conversation immediately preceding this. But some of the paving stones that were used in the landmarks meeting about the Met, they had sort of open geometric shapes with grass coming out. But there are some ways to start looking at some permeable pavement. So I would love to make sure that there's permeable pavement added in this too, which is more of a sustainability greening kind of thing, but encouraging finding different ways to add plants and dirt. I would suggest that. And language on that.
I have a suggestion. So,
Yeah.
Don't laugh.
No, all ideas are good.
Don't laugh. So I do think that there should be significant exploration of underground pedestrian walkability paths. The fact that you can walk through Rockefeller Center, that you actually have to take a train to get from Penn Station to Port Authority shouldn't be. If you look at a city like Toronto, the thing that blows my mind about Toronto is a lot of it's underground, and a lot of that has to do with the weather. We should have caught on to that. There's a lot of ability to connect some of the underground spaces that already exist. And if you're building, what better time to create that kind of conversation as open public space conversation, because people need, the city has, I mean, you look at Herald Square, you need someplace else to walk.
Okay, so yeah, that's actually to create spaces under, I think some of the problems might run into not having ownership over large sites, but
in the plan.
in the rezoning, so it's those 4 different quadrants that are not contiguous.
Yeah.
But
Which is
in
annoying.
spaces where possibility.
Where possible, to explore the options where possible, okay?
It used to exist. It doesn't obviously now, but it used to exist.
To get from the train at Rockefeller Center to get from underground at Rockefeller Center, you can go all the way underground in that Spaceship 2000 hallway.
There are tunnels and spaces that could be
That could be created and opened in certain ways,
Yeah.
or could be activated in a way for public enjoyment.
This is to create money. We should ask for the money to do that kind of.
Because that, especially in colder cities like Winnipeg has that, Toronto, Montreal, where you wouldn't have to necessarily step up over because it's
Okay,
freezing.
yeah, point taken. I really want to get us out of here as fast as possible.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think Southwark is
Is
taking
this
notes on
part
this.
of the points of agreement?
That is the description of what points of agreement are. We are looking at what I circulated. That's a printout that I don't think we have.
MCB5, the title of it is MCB5 MSX.
So the primary things under the open space are fully funding the Broadway Vision plan. It's mandating POPs on large sites, make 7th and 8th pedestrian zones permanent and add new zones for 6th Avenue, 5.5 Avenue, 7.5 Avenue. So these are new open spaces in a quadrant. I think that is exactly what we would I think we would love to have more open spaces and places to move if we're adding more people. Funding for bids to provide operations and maintenance for the new public space that we are creating and asking to be created. And then also with more people comes more of that. Fewer commercial buildings within these bids, their assessment funding could change dramatically. And then create new open spaces, plazas, and public parks, including playgrounds, pools, ball fields, and other, I would love a ball field, and other active recreation facilities for both passive and active spaces. And then again, importantly, funding for public bathroom access, baby changing tables, etc. And the next one under sustainability and resiliency, it is support passive design such as urban greening to reduce the urban heat index, clean air, manage stormwater, and promote biodiversity, incentivize renewables, promote smart building, limits on embodied carbon, require recycling and reuse of materials when buildings are demolished, and then upgrade the utilities to match new occupancies. I think that we could add a little bit more. It's under the small business thing that Tom brought up, but I think adding public art to these spaces, it's already covered in some of the pops, but I think having additional things to programs and also recognizing, I think that I would love recognizing that in the, they're gonna lose some of the commercial tenants within the bids, but I think recognizing that the value of the residential real estate goes up because of the public space and that parks really work for residential like builders too, because the value of that property is much higher near parks. It's generally an economic driver too. So, okay, comments. I'm seeing Charles.
Hi, Chair. So focusing on the public spaces, I was wondering about anything we can put in about community gardens or things like they do in Europe with allotments where you can actually rent like an area, sort of like a community garden, but you get your own patch to work on that you get for like a few months at a time. One thing I haven't noticed is anything about that. As we know, with being in a big city, it's one thing having spaces to walk around and enjoy, but there's nowhere actually where anyone has a proper garden to actually grow stuff, like vegetables or plants or anything like that. And oh, sorry.
So maybe exploring options in like different ways, whether it's like indoor grow spaces or, which is also allowed with some of the City of Guest stuff, but roof gardens maybe, or ways to find growing for consumable food.
Yeah, and also maybe a new city recreation center, because the only one we have in our area is not even in our district. You have to go all the way far to the first, 23rd Street between First and
Okay,
FDR,
so like an
all the way to
indoor-
Chelsea,
But an
for
indoor space.
recreation, like gym and swimming and stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay.
We don't have anything in our district at all, as it comes to a city recreation center.
Okay, Southworth, I think you had some comments, but I am no longer shared on the document. So, do you have comments, Southworth, on ideas for public spaces for this that we want to add?
I mean, one was actually his, what Charles just said. Some of it was also language like that's probably included in a little bit of what you said, but like tree canopy expansion.
Street trees.
Yeah, things like calling those out. One additional thing that I was thinking that's not in the first draft was really nailing in like adequate funding and staffing resources for parks, because knowing that like to manage the increased usage of the like very few ones we have.
The few we have is yeah, that
But like if there are gonna be more people.
demanding that parks get, in order to have this go through, that parks need to be funded.
Yeah, and then.
Back at what it was promised before it was taken away.
Right, and like, and you did, I think you did actually include like the permeable paving.
Yeah, you've been taking the notes on that, okay.
Yeah,
Just making sure that we're capturing
I'm just saying.
what we want to send on to Nancy.
Yeah.
And again, we can get into
some
the
of
weeds
it,
on this
yeah.
more, like
And
some of
like
this
a
is
statement
broad.
about accessibility and inclusivity.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think anything that would be.
I think asking for major art installations or like additional funding for arts programming be included.
Yeah.
Again, these are also, they can only get a certain amount of this stuff for us when they go and they get through with the zoning change. They're the ones who argue on our behalf. So this is just to give them more of our top priorities to argue with. But given that our district has some of the least amount of public space, we'll get into the weeds on like how much we don't have in like the next set of this. But this is just for the high level stuff, visioning what we want. We want plants, we want dirt, we want more open spaces, we want underground ways to get around with more people. We want art, we want small businesses to be able to have more, which is part of our conversation about the kiosks.
And then the one other thing that I wanted to make sure was included somewhere was something just to make sure that like when they create POPs or any other systems like that going forward in this NSNX area, that like they're really like robust, ongoing, strong maintenance agreements that are enforceable by the city, because right now it's like it's very hard to get residential buildings to actually maintain their pop system.
Yeah, I think,
Clarify something on that?
yeah,
Yeah,
Doesn't seem like after the new FAR, limit, there's gonna be much.
there's gonna
other
be,
pops.
there's not gonna be a lot of it,
There's
but
not gonna be,
I
pretty
do
much
think,
no bonuses will apply.
I do think that it might be worth adding, though. I think that it's gonna be pretty limited what we are able to get, which I think is why it's important to really drive home that Broadway thing. But I do think that maybe that brings up something else, that maybe this is an opportunity for us to advocate for higher enforcement penalties of those pops in public spaces that we do have currently. That if you are in violation, I think maybe we can advocate for a higher penalty. I think that, like in our prior thing, this 80-20 thing, we should advocate for not current concessions, but for new concessions, that they go into an 80-20 arrangement. I think that this is an opportunity to do that, because that would be a change. It would be a creation of this trust fund. So the creation of the trust fund is important, along with, I think, the Broadway element is sort of our biggest shot here to do stuff. And then also plantings and adding street trees. But to Myrna's point, I think the enforcement of our existing ones, we should have language about that, since it's unlikely we're gonna get more. I think I would love to see at increasing the penalties for, but the funding to have enforcement, and then also the penalties if you are found in violation.
and just to be clear about what I was drafting off of with Charles about, like he was talking about growth spaces or community gardens or things like that. But if there's language to say that, like, we would like them to try and like think about or prioritize or explore like underutilized city-owned lots and parcels that potentially for new parks.
For new park spaces, or
Within this district.
or finding like places to open up roofs and spaces and
Yeah.
like found space, and we can do a better job of funding it to find more. And
Like, yeah, it's like a already city-owned building or lot. that's
doing,
within this area.
find more,
Right,
but
okay.
greening of all of our infrastructure. Michael K. do you have anything you want to see from a parks perspective added into this of
No.
more plants?
No, good.
Great. Okay, it's not a voting item,
Not
so
a voting item.
it's not a voting item.
Okay.
It is a,
New business?
yes, new business.
You'll be glad to know that this Sunday at 11 o'clock in front of the Flatiron Building, I will be beginning a Flatiron District tour where you can learn about the Flatiron District stuff that even you smart people don't even know. You join me, you can learn some stuff that you don't know and be entertained and have a wonderful sunny afternoon from 11 to 12 to 1 o'clock even. So I invite you to join me. It's free. And if you're not happy, of course, you get double your money back.
Charles, I see your hand is raised.
Yes, new business. Madison Square Park are having a auction and a Texas grill thing, event, fundraising at Hill Country on May 7th. Maybe we could, I don't know, Chair, if you'd like to reach out to Madison Square Park, maybe we could put it on our website, that they're having that auction, and you could actually win an experience or go to a Texas rodeo, you might win, or something like that. So I thought I would mention that.
We can coordinate about that offline. Great. Any other new business? Okay. Well, I now adjourn the April 3rd meeting of the Parks and Public Spaces Committee. Thank you all for your.
We're not even seeing this.